Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 143. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I am Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge in the comics forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Do you ever feel that nasty taste in your mouth? You know the one. Pizza starts to taste like moldy pita bread. Soda tastes like soap. Brownies taste like, well, you get the idea. Your palate is bogged down by continuity. Well, fear not, faithful comic fans, because there's Sensei of the Whatnot's palate-cleansing comics. Over 70,000 comics have been endorsed by Jim Seguin to be continuity light and to provide some shine to your weary palate. Sure, we all love to know how R.I.P. ties into Final Crisis, where the current issue of JLA fits into Green Arrow Black Canary, but let's be honest, sometimes you need a seriously shiny, continuity-free palate so you can cause some severe eye damage to friends and co-workers who are blinded by your scary smile. So, be sure to check out Sensei of the Whatnot's palate-cleansing comics, appearing regularly on episodes of Raging Bullets. So says the Sensei of the Whatnot Seguin and his shimmering smile.
Holy long introduction, Batman. Bitter guy got, has he ever got a shut up?
You know, one of the advantages of editing the show is I catch how many times you call a comic a palate cleanser. It's like 75% of the line.
I'm going to need to find a new buzzword. Okay. Mental note, Jim.
I actually do quite like it. I'm only teasing. I just thought it was pretty funny at the time. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. On this episode, Jim and I are going to be chatting about Doom Patrol. It's actually the first of a two-part segment. Wow, was this a mega epic? We were talking to David Foss, Simulated Stereo from the forum. This is his In-Stock Trades Rage of the Month that we wanted to chat about. Jim and I had never read this before, and this is a huge book. I had no idea what we were in for. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It was just interesting. We also have some listener voicemails that we're going to be chatting about. And we are going to be at the New York Comic Con, February 6th through 8th, 2009. There's a handy link on the site, so please check it out. We're going to be part of the podcast arena again, so definitely join us there. We'd love to see you. We are continuing to support the Hero Initiative, www.heroinitiative.org, or call 310-909-7809. Jim, I want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Chibi from the forums because I've been kind of working on the website and tweaking it and kind of simplifying the organization of it. And Mr. Chibi sent me a PM on the forum and said, I'm good with graphic design and, I have some ideas and some things that maybe might help you out. I figured the dude was going to do like a banner or something like that. The dude did this whole new layout for me. So for 2009, it's probably going to be over the next couple weeks. I'm going to be slowly implementing it. But for 2009, we're going to have a facelift on RagingBullets.com thanks to Mr. Chibi from the forum. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. He sent it back to me and he just said, if you don't like it, no big deal. I said, dude, it's awesome. So it's real bright, it's vibrant, and so it's coming soon. So I just wanted to give him a shout out because it was really exciting for me. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Absolute Superman for Tomorrow, the hardcover. Written by Brian Azzarello with art and cover by Jim Lee and Scott Williams. Cover by Jim Lee from Brian Azzarello from 100 Bullets and artists Jim Lee and Scott Williams. Batman Hush comes this oversized slipcase volume collecting the entire 12-issue For Tomorrow epic. Originally presented in Superman 204 to 215. A cataclysmic event has struck Earth. Millions of people have vanished without a trace. No one is left unaffected, not even Superman. Now the Man of Steel must face the mystery of how millions of people vanished without a trace, only to find that he may be responsible. But the solution leads to a royal rumble with Wonder Woman, and after a battle with the deadly Equus, Superman comes face to face with the villain who has been responsible for turning his life upside down. And it's regularly $75, 40% off, only $45, which if you're buying absolutes, I get all the absolutes. If you're buying them at a discount, it makes it a lot easier to take. Because at cover price, dude, I couldn't get as many as I'm getting. It really would make me pick and choose.
Yeah, this was a immediate grab. As soon as I saw it, I was like, ooh, wait, hold on. And I jumped on this bad boy. So this has been added to the collection.
JSA Hardcover Volume 4, Thy Kingdom Come Part 3, written by Geoff Johns, Alex Ross, and Peter Tomasi. This one is picking up where Part 2 left off. It covers Justice Society of America 19 to 22, and the Justice Society of Kingdom Come specials Magog, Superman, and the Kingdom. Now, this is $24.99 regularly, 40% off only $14.99. I picked this for a reason, Jim. I don't know if you noticed. It's 224 pages, but on Newsarama, they just had an announcement that Geoff Johns, as of issue 26, is leaving JSA.
Yeah, I was sad to see that happen. So
Yeah.
you knew it was going to eventually, he couldn't last forever on the title, but yeah, so this would be a nice epic thing to go off on.
Yeah, and if you didn't pick up volume 1 of his run, everything in the regular JSA series before this volume, I urge you to go back and pick all that up if you enjoyed this run, because he has had an incredibly huge run on JSA. When you say it's stopping at issue 26, well, you forget he also wrote 90% of the whole other run, and multiple crossovers and things that went along with it as well. So I highly recommend checking that out, because I loved both versions of JSA. I'm going to be curious to see. There's been no announcement as far as who's taking over. That's the only thing. I don't know about you, Jim. That's for me the one thing that when those announcements come in, because I've loved JSA so much, I'm nervous of who is going to be taking over for him.
Right now, you're just sitting there wondering, and you're on that edge, and you're just thinking about it, and I don't know. This was the title that I was like, I'm not too sure about it, and then it went from that to being, oh my God, I love this thing, and now I'm worried, is this going to be one of those things where I love his writing of it, or do I love the characters? And it's, because this is a solid, title that I gravitate to and I read. I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, here's the big question now: was it his writing that I was gravitating to, or was it these people? So it's one of those things. I'm wondering, I'm curious, and it's kind of a moments for me coming up.
It's kind of one of those things like Teen Titans right now is a great example of a book where Geoff Johns was writing Teen Titans and I was adoring it. And then, Sean McKeever's run's finally kicking off for me where I'm really enjoying it right now. And I'm honestly equally into Sean McKeever's run now as I was to Geoff Johns' run. But it took me a while to get there because I was very sold on what he was doing before. So I'm going to be curious to see if the person who's taking over JSA has some big shoes to fill. But Geoff Johns seems to have a lot of faith in this person, so it's funny to talk about this ghost-like person because we just don't know who it is. I'm excited, though, to see who's going to take over this book. Ambitious project to take over because there's a lot of characters and a huge dynamic here.
Yeah, there's some people I don't think I'd want to follow, and I think Geoff Johns is the guy. I don't know if I'd want to follow him. It's one of those, how do you follow what the guy's done and all that? So good luck to whoever has it. I feel kind of bad for him.
Well, to me, it's one of those books, though, and Geoff Johns said it in the exit interview, too, that this is a flagship title. This is a top-tier title. This is a top-selling title. So I'm confident in the fact that just by the fact that that's being said and he's saying that there's going to be somebody put on there who's really going to do some heavy hitting on this book. Because, you're not going to let that title drop. You can't.
No, and they'll probably put someone with an equal name as his. I can't see them going to some that's only written like one comic in their life. So this is going to be a top player.
Yeah, I'm curious. Well, I'm curious to see who.
Yeah,
I'm really curious to see who, because I think that's going to be for me a huge thing. I'm going to be curious to see them take over for this. But Geoff Johns, I know, is going on to. He's going to be doing the Flash mini. He's going to be going on and doing the Superman Secret Origin mini, and then he's, of course, doing Green Lantern. And a lot of this is to focus on Blackest Night, but not only that, I guess after those miniseries, then he's going to be going back on to 3 monthly books again. So this is just changing things around a little bit, and so he can focus on some new projects that he's working on. So I'm excited to see what those are going to be. It's one of those things where I am thankful that he had such a lengthy run on this, because this is one of those runs that I just adore. I've got it all in trade from the Volume 1, and I've got the hardcovers of Volume 2 as they've been releasing them, and I love this run collected. So it was one of those that when I saw it was kind of a no-brainer with the news to be able to just kind of shout out what I've been enjoying so much about JSA, because I just think it's a fantastic book. whatever your shipping preferences, whatever your bag and boarding preferences, DCBService.com accommodates your collecting needs. We've got a winner for our in-stock trades contest. We got Ragingcontest@gmail.com. Listeners have been submitting things for the website, and our winner for this time around is Mike Sims. And Mike Sims wouldn't have been shocked. Mike Sims won because of how many Where's What Not Now submissions he's been doing. He's been kind of the Where's What Not Now MVP. We've gotten so many, not just from Mike Sims, but from so many listeners, so many fun parodies of you and me that they've been putting into that section of the website. And please feel free, listeners, to keep participating in that and any section of our website. Listener content is what drives the website. I have everything from blogs to articles to anything really that comes to mind for you, whether it's artwork or comic strips or anything you're talented at or want to just play around with, reviews of comics. Let us know and shoot me an email at ragingcontest@gmail.com. We want to get that up there. You guys, the website is a community experience. The Raging Bullets website is our listeners. So you guys participating in that is a huge help to us, and we can't thank you enough for, in the over almost 3 years now that we've been doing Raging Bullets. You guys have made that website grow with your content. So thanks so much for doing that. And Mike will kind of figure out what that new book's going to be, and we'll announce it over the next couple weeks. Maybe for the next episode. If not, it'll be the episode after that we'll officially announce what that book of the month is going to be so you guys can follow along with us. InStockTrades.com is your source for your collected edition needs. Remember that orders over $50 have free shipping. Thank you for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Jim, we have a voicemail line for the show, which we have a great voicemail segment on this episode. Feel free to send us your thoughts on DC Comics, news, characters by calling 440-388-4434. We want to have you part of the show. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Well, now that we got clean, shiny palettes, let's go ahead and talk some Doom Patrol.
Holy caffeine!
And our first review, or our next review, is going to be Doom Patrol, The Painting That Ain't Paris. The writer is Grant Morrison. Penciler is Richard Case. Inker John Nyberg. Colorist Daniel Vazzo. Letterer J. Dub and John Workman. Editor Scott Nybakken. Nybakken? The original cover artist for the series was Simon Bisler, and the trade cover artist is Brian Bulland.
Yeah, the Brian Bulland cover is really sharp.
Yeah, it looked kind of cool. I liked it.
You can introduce David?
I'm about to, but first you do that. And I was going to say, and joining us on this discussion will be David Faust, Simulated Stereo. Hey, I'm looking out for the guy as well.
We were just talking Batman the Cult, so he and I have already bonded, so it's like he's protected.
Oh, great. I'm going to get tag teamed here. But joining us for this discussion will be Dave Faust, Simulated Stereo from the forum. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, guys. It's great to be a part of it. I've been listening to it for over a year now, and I don't know, it's just great to finally do it, to actually finally talk to people about comics.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things that when we got our deal with In-Stock Trades, and we'd already been doing stuff like that anyway, but then I was like, well, this would be a great way to get listeners on directly and let you guys kind of pick a segment to drive. And this is perfect because when you said it, I'm like, you know what? I had thought I had read it, but I was thinking Animal Man because I had read his Animal Man run. I've never read any of his Doom Patrol. So this, for me, was interesting because I completely am walking into this without having read any of it. I'm glad that you chose it because you exposed me to something I had never read before, so it was quite interesting. I think, why don't we start with you, Dave, and you can kind of tell us maybe what drove you to pick this particular volume, and then, I think maybe we can end off with Jim and I talking about how we felt about this volume so far. So, Dave, why don't you go ahead? What made you decide, like, hey, I want to pick this particular volume of Doom Patrol to share?
Well, this was the second volume of Grant Morrison's run in the Doom Patrol series. I chose it because, instead of the first volume, mainly because the first volume was good at kind of establishing the new direction of the Doom Patrol, or rather the direction that Morrison wanted to take. But this volume brings the Doom Patrol kind of into the DC proper and really shows what makes them different from the other DC team books and team characters and whatnot. So that's why I chose this volume. And it has some of my favorite stories in it and some of my favorite characters. I love the Brotherhood of Dada.
Interesting. When I first read this, and it's a normal experience that I've had throughout years of reading comics. Yeah, I've had experiences where I jump on in the middle of runs because, you know, if you didn't have the budget to read a ton of comics, if one title ends and you want to try something new, you're going to have to start off in the middle, and sometimes you didn't, especially before there were comic shops, you didn't always have the option to go back and get the start of a story arc or something like that. In this case, it is the start of a story arc. But like the first two issues, my experience with this was I was confused with what was going on because I was getting my head around who everybody was. But then after that, it clicked for me, and I really started having a good time with all this wackiness. I went back and I reread the first two issues. They read very different for me because I had a handle on who the Doom Patrol was. Couple observations that I made right away. First of all, my first run through, I was kind of focused on the fact that, and I do this now, would I want to be any of these characters? One of the connections that first of all, one of the nice things I like about the Doom Patrol is they're these misfits that have these powers that are almost, I don't want to say like a curse. Well, they are like a curse. Because if you look at Crazy Jane, Negative Man, who Negative Man's multiple people, kind of connected through that in this one, which it's interesting. I don't know. I actually did I had to look up this Negative Man because it's different than the Negative Man that was done in the most recent Byrne run, where he actually did combine with a doctor, a female doctor. That's where there's references in there. So and the negative entity. So there's three entities inside this one person. So actually, I wanted to do a checkup on that. But then you've got Robot Man, whose brain is inside a metal shell. So none of these people have powers that you would want to have necessarily the way that they got them. You know, like, sure, you'd want to be powerful like him. But I think that's kind of the strength of it, too. We've all had moments in our life where there's been something about ourselves we would like to change. And we've gained strength from the people that we've associated ourselves with. And that seems to be what this group has gotten. Because you see them as the story progresses in this volume. Because it's a very, very new team at this point, from what I'm gathering, from what I'm reading here, and you see them start gelling together and getting together. So I got a lot out of it. First two issues, I will say, and I'm sure, you know, if anybody's following along with this, and this is their first volume as well, it's normal in a series that you're trying to get your handle on the heroes, the villains, everybody, when you don't know anybody. I know who Robot Man is and Negative Man, but it was clear this was different. Jim, what was your experience with this?
Well, first off, I can actually, looking at, you know, character people you'd like to be, I could really see you, Norge, as Dorothy. I think I could see that clear as a bell, and if anybody wants to make a Where's Whatnot with Sean as Dorothy, I would really appreciate it.
See, I was thinking Crazy Jim.
You know what? I wouldn't have an issue with that, because you know, Crazy Jane was definitely an interesting person.
Well, see, what I would do is I would just kill the personalities of yours I don't like. Starting with the singing one.
Can't get rid of the singing one, man. Yeah, there are people who ask for
singing
that.
Jim.
Are you really?
See? The man's got taste. The man's got taste.
Well, I could give that personality to him.
But I also like free jazz, so what can you do?
There you go.
Oh, cool.
There you go. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
What was your feelings on it?
First time through, I really did not like this. I was sitting there and I muscled through the trade, and I'm just thinking, oh dear God, how am I going to talk about this one? Because honestly, I fully admit that first time through was a chore to read it. I was just like, what? And I was like, a lot of confusion, a lot of just like, you know, I was like angry because I like twists and turns and whatnot, but I didn't want my comic book to be such work to read it and understand it. I wanted, you know, something light, and Grant Morrison is never something light, so it was a little tough for me.
Do you think it's because you walked in wanting something light, and then you...
Here's what it was. I walked in thinking of the Doom Patrol that we had seen in that Brave and the Bold.
Oh, so you didn't realize you were getting a very different Doom Patrol.
I didn't realize I was thinking, okay, it was going to be a lot of wacky, you know, Addams Family type, you know, vibe and stuff like that, and I'm like, wait, this... It is there was a lot of goofy stuff that I got and stuff I latched onto immediately, but it wasn't the same type of thing. So that was a really, kneecapper. And then I'm trying to, the man likes to talk, and the man likes to make some thick, deep discussions and meaningful discussions that it takes read through to say, oh, he just said this. Why didn't he just say this?
Wait, I love it that on our podcast, you have an issue with the fact that the man likes to talk.
He's a bit wordy. Come on. Why can't he be brief and concise like us?
It seems almost like an oxymoron.
I know.
To even say that.
Yeah, I know.
I tend to say whatnot probably about as much as Jim, so it just comes up naturally in conversation. So you'll have 2 whatnots tonight, probably.
Sweet. Whatnot in stereo.
Yep.
With stereo.
Yeah, with stereo.
So did your experience change that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, and it did change as the things was going on. And by like the 3rd read-through, I had a definite, more understanding. Because I understood what was going on in a story. Once I understood what was going on in a story, I was able to actually appreciate some stuff more and pull it up. I am really looking forward to reading the first volume because I want to learn more about who the Doom Patrol are.
Okay.
So,
now, at what point did you click with it? Where are you at on it? I'm kind of that's what I'm curious about at this point.
I wouldn't say it's not like the Titans for me, so it's not something I'm like going, yeah, Doom Patrol, woohoo, but it's not something I'm like, oh dear God, I never want to read that again. There's a enjoyment, there's an appreciation for some of the stuff that he did in here. There's some, nice, beautiful, just deep, meaningful discussions that are interwoven with some little bit of goofiness, a little bit of whatnot thrown in there that, I appreciate just the writing and just the skill that it took to craft such a weird, beautiful, jumbled up, craziness that is the Doom Patrol. So there's appreciation, and I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading the first volume. There is a 3rd volume of this, correct?
Yeah, there's more than that.
I think 5.
Yeah, so I can see myself picking up the other volumes just to continue on with the story because I want to see exactly where they go with this team, and so there's definitely going to be more reading of Doom Patrol in the future.
So you liked it enough now that you would actually...
Yeah. I'll buy it again. It's just it's one of those things where I had to literally, that first time was a fight through. Then the second time I'd fight. Okay, let me reread this page. Let me reread this page. Let me reread this page. Oh, okay, 3 times reading the same page, I get what he's saying. Okay, page 2. Oh, multiple read, and I was doing multiple reads through each page just to understand what the guy was saying. And some of the stuff clicked immediately. Some of the stuff I'm like, I thought it clicked, and then after reading the whole story, I'm like, oh my God, he was doing this. Oh, okay, let me reread everything because now I have a completely different perspective on it. So yeah, this was definitely one of those things where I can't read this if I'm like in a bad mood or anything like that, where I need my comics to be my friendly escape. This is something where I'm like, okay, I'm in the mood to sit down. I got a nice comfortable chair, my cup of coffee right now. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to read and peruse a book.
Do you like that kind of storytelling?
If I'm in the right mood.
Okay.
If I've had a bad day at work, then it's, Tiny Titans, Teen Titans, Robin, stuff that are my great escape that I just absolutely eat up, especially the Tiny Titans where it's just a fun read where there's, not a lot of deep thinking. If I'm not in a bad mood, if I'm in the mood for like reading a novel or reading, like that, I want something, there, I'll grab something like this. It's like, you have to be in the right mindset to read Watchmen, to read, Kingdom Come, really. You got to be in the right mindset for it. This is definitely one of those things where you got to want to read this. You got to want to, study it and whatnot.
See, I didn't have that experience with this one, though, where, and I'm not saying you're wrong, and don't take it that way. I think it's important for our listeners just to kind of get a handle on where the different experiences were on this. It was my first time reading this Doom Patrol 2. Now, I will say, you mentioned something that I thought was a key. You were expecting the Doom Patrol that you've currently seen. I knew it wasn't. So I walked in, I guess, knowing that this was going to be a very different Doom Patrol. So when I read the first 2 issues, I had confusion in the first 2 issues only because obviously I knew who Robot Man was. No problem there. Niles Calder, I knew that whole gist. But Negative Man, it was clear to me that Negative Man had a different different MO, a different background. And then Crazy Jane, I didn't know at all.
Yeah.
But once I got a handle on them, I was great. So after the first 2 issues, for me, everything kind of clicked, and I went along. I didn't have any problem with it at all. I loved the wacky. This was a wacky read. It's nuts. And I think it's one of the nice things about having the freedom to do this with the characters like Doom Patrol. You can do some things with these characters because they're not your top tier. It's not the Teen Titans. It's not JLA. There's some freedom to really kind of do some of the stuff that he did with Invisibles. Where you just get kind of a little wacky, a little crazy, and kind of, play with some themes and some... and that's the part that I think, to me, I found interesting through this. I had a lot of fun. This was a very funny read for me. I had a good time with this one.
See, a lot of the funny moments for me didn't come from Doom Patrol, per se. It came from Dada.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. See, I was expecting the wacky funness to come from Doom Patrol, and that didn't happen. I was like, oh, yeah.
Well, see, to me, that was part of the strength, though, is you have this wacky kookiness going on around them, and the Doom Patrol are the investigators or the troubleshooting team. They're like the strike force. They're almost specialists in dealing with the bizarre and the weird. So I liked that there was more of a serious tone to them, which it's funny to say that there's a serious tone with them when they've got a character like Crazy Jane, but that was part of it. They were trying to help Crazy Jane. I got kind of like the vibe of what I like in the best of the X-Men from this, in the sense that it was clear that they were trying to, in many ways, help each other. They were these bizarre misfits that have these just like, really these horrible issues to deal with in many ways, but yet together, when you see them together working as a unit, we got to see some interesting teamwork from these guys. And even when they were separated, there was ways that they were helping each other, or helping each other at least react to what happened when they were separated. So it was kind of cool. And I liked learning about them through their interactions with the villains. Because like Crazy Jane, a lot of my experience with learning about Crazy Jane came from her fight with the Fog, for example. As that was going on. So I think this is going to be an interesting book to talk about. I really think so. But I thought before we even got into it, it would be fun, seeing as you and I were kind of newbies to this, first of all, talk about why Dave chose this, and to talk about where your and I heads were at in reading it. It sounds like you and I had 2 different reading experiences, though, because I did enjoy it the first time through. I will agree with you that Morrison is one of those writers that sometimes, and I think it depends from book to book. This one was not one that I felt like I had to try, get a handle on before I really enjoyed it. For some reason, it just clicked. But it may be because I walked in,
we walked
knowing
in different mindsets.
Background about this. Like, I never read this Doom Patrol, but I have enough background on it. I'm familiar enough with it that I understood that this was going to be something very different, that these were different characters. So that might have been the difference that might have been the key difference in our experiences right from the get-go. Why don't we go ahead and jump into issue 26?
Okay. Now, issue opens up in Japan, and we see an interview in a hospital with Sunburst, Japan's number one hero. And now this was the guy from Final Crisis, right?
Right.
Okay, that's what I thought, and I was like, I kind of like the fact that, seeing in Final Crisis that Grant pulled this character again, especially considering what happens to him in a little bit. Good to see the guy still around, I guess.
I like the whole MO of the girl who's sleepwalking.
Oh, yeah. Sleepwalker is a pretty cool character. And, I liked this sequence because, one, it shows, once again, kind of like a believability. Here, he's a, superhero. He's the number one popular superhero in Japan. He's got the paparazzi following him. His TV show, The Adventures of Sunburst, is the number one ranked show. They're always around him. He's got a little bit of an attitude to him. I'm kind of seeing more of a Hollywood type attitude, where he's like, hoorah, look at me, I'm number one, I'm the best there is type. It kind of ate, little bits of, kind of, I don't want to say he's a bit of an ass, but he was. You think about it.
Well, he was a celebrity. I don't know if it's even so much that as. I really liked it because it felt very today.
Yeah.
Because it would be a superhero today would be in the media, would be in the press. They would have cartoon shows. They would merchandise him. Because anytime there's money to be made, people are going to be all over you for merchandising efforts. So it would be in this case. That's because he does obviously has a very public-looking face. He's very human-looking. He's somebody that people would look up to as a role model. You would want to be him, which is a sharp contrast to the Doom Patrol, who would not have a cartoon show. This Doom Patrol would not have a cartoon show because they're a mess.
Yeah, kind of had that little bit of a cavalier attitude because they're talking about, because he's the one who initially brought in the quiz, and he's sitting there talking like, yeah, she gave you a little bit of trouble there. He's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, she calmed down a bit once I broke her arms and legs, and I was just like, okay, yeah, that's not a thing I'd ever hear Superman say. Maybe Batman, but not Superman. This is like their kind of, in a way, I was seeing this guy as their Superman. As their dun-dun-dun kind of hero, sitting there saying, yeah, it was a pretty tough fight, but once I broke her arms and legs, I was just like, that just for me kind of like, whoa, what kind of guy is this? And that's...
Well, it also shows that his I think from the way he carries himself, his motivations are very different than... You're trying to compare him to Superman. His motivations are very different than Superman's. So in his case, it's getting the job done. Then you get the notoriety. Notoriety means spot. I mean, it's one of the things I liked about him. I'm like, you know what? This is the way it would be for a lot of heroes because you're in the public eye. It's not to say that he's not a good guy because I definitely got the impression he's a good guy, and he did. I mean, he ran into a situation that looked pretty bad, and it didn't fare too well. But I was impressed with that because I do feel that he was heroic. But he's not somebody that I would necessarily. Not every superhero is going to be the ultimate role model. Just like not every police officer is. Just like not every... it was very real in the whole thing. There's some of them that are, where they're like excessively great role models, where they're honored for that role. But there's other ones that they're about doing the job. And there's nothing wrong with that. That isn't a negative critique. When A and B, his job is to go in there and take down the villain, he's going to try and do that. He just, and he does it the whatever way is necessary.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do, and just so clear the record, I did like the character because of the fact that I saw him a bit of an ass. I saw him a bit of the the pompous guy who wants the spotlight and look at me type thing. I liked that because it was a contrast, and it was something I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a cool character, especially with what happens to him when he goes to visit the quiz, and spends a little time with her, and I was immediately like, oh wow, there's my future ex. She's got some power, she's a little bit cute, and she is completely off her rocker insane. I was like, damn, this is my kind of girl.
That actually does fit some of your dating experiences.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it was just this was the opening to this story arc, and I was like, wow, this is going to be something different. This is kind of the thing where these are very subtle, small stuff that just really gets your attention. You got this guy who's like the hoorah. You have a complete whack job who has every power you can imagine unless you think of the power. And that's the way you strip away her powers, which I thought was just the coolest type of power set you can have, because she's got it unless you think it. And I'm thinking to myself, how the heck do you beat her but just start throwing out different powers? That it's a power, it's a contest more of imagination. Who can come up with the wackiest power, and how can you use it to your benefit, which we end up seeing in a fight later on. So I was like, oh, that's a cool thing with this. I'm like, yeah, this is, how do you come up with an idea like that?
Well, one of the things about this, or Morrison's run on the Doom Patrol, especially in this volume, when you have the characters like Sunburst and then the later appearances of the Justice League Europe and Superman, is a way to kind of separate what the Doom Patrol does from other heroes. And in a way, Morrison kind of brought the Doom Patrol back to what it originally was supposed to be, as a kind of group of misfits who can't fit in anywhere else. Because kind of in the 80s, when the Doom Patrol series was going, I think it was under Paul Cooperberg, they were pretty much a generic hero team up until the Invasion arc, the big Invasion crossover. And then that's when Morrison took over, and in his introduction in the first volume, he says that he wanted to kind of take it back to what it originally was, as a group of misfits going up against some very strange villains, and you really get that in this trade more than any of the others, I think.
That's a distinction that I really appreciated, because it sets them aside from, because I mean, I'm reading a lot of team books, and one thing I enjoy about them is that there's something unique about each experience. This, to me, I want, like, I would love a Doom Patrol monthly like this right now.
It would be awesome.
I think that there's room for it in the DCU, set currently right now, with some wackiness and all that. But, with this flavor to it, I would love that.
For me, it would all depend on who is doing the writing of it. Because you think about, like, with the title like Shadow Pack.
Right.
That had the right writer, right team, right, that had a flow to it. And even though that one took me how many issues for me to get my hands on it. If the wrong person's doing Doom Patrol and you don't get the, that wackiness, the outsider edge to it, it could just end up being, a mess. Whereas I think there's some characters that I don't want to say easier to write, because it's not easy to write any of this, but there are some characters out there that I think you could, have different people, rotate through it and handle it. There are some writers who will do a much better job on it, but it's, I'm thinking like, Green Lantern Corps. These are solid characters that, if I heard writer changes, I wouldn't be as worried about, because they're am I making any sense?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're getting at. And the other big problem is, and we got to be honest about that, it's a tricky topic, because you've got to really get the right creative team, the right kind of critical acclaim behind it. And even then, we've seen books canceled recently that have been critically acclaimed, like Manhunter's a great example of a book that's being canceled that's critically acclaimed, that is having a tough time finding a big enough audience to maintain itself. That's the problem, I think, with the Doom Patrol right now, is it's hard to survive when you're a team like this in this market. When you were talking about the Shadow Pack team, like, well, that would be a great team to write this. Yeah. Either Willingham or Sturgis, I think, would do very well from this. Geoff Johns has mentioned in various panels that Doom Patrol is a team he'd have interest in writing. And I would love to see his Doom Patrol. That would be interesting. It's funny. It was as I was reading this book and I was getting into it, and I started really getting a handle on the misfit nature of them. But you're right, Jim. I liked the fact that the wackiness was not them per se. I mean, obviously their power set and their issues, but they were the serious strike force going in to deal with the issues that nobody else really had the abilities to handle. With the craziness going on in their lives, they're really specialists in this. And I mean, it really fits that they would be the kind of characters like you would call in Zatanna and the Magic Crew, like from Shadow Pact, to handle DC's magic issues and demons from another world and things like that. Doom Patrol you would call in for paintings that are eating towns. Yeah, I mean, I that type of stuff to me. I'm like, yeah, it's a scary threat, it's a wacky threat, and it made for compelling storytelling because they're going through multiple dimensions inside a painting, and that type of stuff is just kind of like, ooh, I would read more of this.
Oh yeah,
I will read more of this.
Yeah, I'm probably going to pick up more as well. So.
Well, and we touched on in the beginning, they did solicit recently a new volume of it. So they're continuing to collect this and periodically put it out. I'm not sure how long, because I'll have to take a look at how long his run ran. I do know that... Was it 5 trades?
So it was 5 trades. Yeah. They're all out. Okay.
Because I knew there was one that they... Didn't they just solicit one recently, the 5th one?
It came out several months ago, I think.
Okay.
It's been a while. I ordered it a while back.
I knew I had... Buzz. And that's the last one?
That's the last one, yes.
And then isn't that Flex Mentalo part of this? Or I mean, it's like a side story or something from this?
He comes in actually into the next volume.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't mean as part of this volume, but I mean that was one that I knew it was kind of a Doom Patrol side miniseries or something.
Right. Yeah, that miniseries has never been reprinted because there was a trademark dispute with Charles Atlas, so they never reprinted it. But he does appear in the next trade, the trade that follows The Painting That Ate Paris, his story with the Doom Patrol.
Did they ever introduce Beast Boy or is he a later version of Doom Patrol?
You don't see him in any of the Morrison trades, and I don't think you see him in anything immediately following either.
You know why? It would have been on Titans during this time.
Okay.
Because when this was being published, he was on. He would have been on the Wolfman run of Titans, where he was featured prominently, and they did reference Doom Patrol in that, but it was more of a. It was like him going home or something like that, which you would see very briefly. So that's interesting.
Okay, cool. Now, I tell you, one thing I really digged about this was the way they introduced and they delved into and they discussed in the villain side of this Brotherhood of Dada, and just the individual members. At the end of this, we have a very clear, kind of clear understanding of who these people are, and I like that and it was funny because I gravitated more to them than I did the Doom Patrol in these especially this first story arc with the painting, because I knew more about them than I did the Doom Patrol, and I was like, yeah, these are kind of interesting characters. I'm a little bit on the wacky side. This is kind of what I was expecting to get from the actual Doom Patrol characters. So I was just like, and the one thing about his storytelling that kind of it added to my confusion, but then after I understood it added to my enjoyment of it, is how he likes to intermix different pieces of the adventure, especially the fight sequences where you have one part here, one part here, one part here, one part here, and you got to truly understand what happened to the character. You go through, and I read them multiple times, just reading this character, this character, this character, this character, and skipping over, then going back and reading, because that was, as I said, part of my confusion was understanding it. And in this intro, we have this whole cool stuff going on with Sunburst, but we also have the fog slowly rolling in. And then we have, Sleepwalker, drifting in. And it was just these cool elements. And you see even the reporter saying, Hey, what's that? Classic, classic, horror movie where this fog comes in and eats people. I was just like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting.
The fog slowly drifting in.
Well, it did.
Nice.
What?
I thought it was funny.
I did too. I did. I'm chuckling. I'm referencing it, so I caught it. I liked the television announcer during the bits with our Sunburst superhero as well. Yeah. Because I kept saying to myself, this is one of those television announcers that you so need to be a casualty of the events around him. Because, he has to know that, this is not a cartoon show. This is really happening, this severe event that's going on right now with the quiz. And he's just sitting there like, hey, it's wild, it's crazy, it's live, the adventures of Sunburst. I'm smack in the middle of it.
See, I kind of saw him a little bit as a professional wrestling announcer. I was half expecting him to say, oh my god, the pandemonium, oh my god, just give a play-by-play for everybody as well.
Well, it's ratings. It's all about ratings. What did you think of Mr. Nobody? That, the former member of the Brotherhood of Evil that we start to see developed in this storyline? What did you think of that character? Because he's really the leader of the Brotherhood of Dada?
Yeah, Nowhere Man.
Or no, yeah.
Yeah, no, right. Mr. Nobody, Nowhere Man.
What did you think of him as a character? He was I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, on this, I guess the background of him was he was the one, he was trying to go legit, I think, at some point. Because he was part of the Brotherhood of Evil. He's kind of like the lost member of the Beatles. He's kind of he's a lost member of the Brotherhood of Evil that was trying to go legit, and then just through circumstance he experiments on himself and turns into
an abstract painting.
Yeah,
he's a modern masterpiece there. Yeah.
Well, he gets experimented on. That's what happens. It was it was a Dr. Bruckner. He was a Nazi war criminal hiding out in Paraguay, and he gets captured and experimented on, and that's what happens. And that's an amazing sequence, actually.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, because that was another one where I was like, whoa, what the heck, and it was one of those multiple read-throughs, but once you actually completely get a grasp on it, I was like, wow, this was a cool villain origin.
I liked when I was looking at the posters, the reason why I went to him, I was looking at the posters in what was apparently his apartment. And, they got the Osmonds, the Bay City Rollers. On the floor, they have that Fisher-Price telephone that when I was a kid, everybody had. You roll the thing along and it would make noise, and I liked seeing all the little pop culture references that were scattered throughout this of the time. So that for me was a little bit of a blast as well. We see Prez, the comic book Prez, on the floor.
Yeah, he's a groovy guy.
Yeah. The artwork I really enjoyed, the amount of tiny details that were scattered throughout.
Yeah, and just as I said, first images of this guy is this full-page spread of his apartment, citadel, safe house, whatever you want to call the thing, and you just see this completely just like, what the heck is this? And it's just like with the other characters, when you're introducing him, you're introducing him with a pop. It's not with like a vicious or violent pop, but it is something that gets your attention, making you go, huh? Oh, okay. And then, if you start looking at all the little details around the place, it can just kind of like make you go, oh my God. That was the, thing. As I said, I was more drawn to the villains in this story than I was the heroes. And
Dude had a Mego Batmobile.
Really?
Yeah, looking on the floor by his foot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And there's a Velveeta truck.
Yeah.
Behind, too.
The artwork is really the artwork I really found to be very pleasing in this, just the amount of tiny details. Because I like that. I like going back through in multiple read-throughs and catching little tiny things in the art that I didn't catch before. To me, that adds a lot of value to my comics when I can go back and kind of get something out of it that I never got the first time through.
Yeah. Now, I wonder how much of that was Grant telling him, hey, put this in there, put this there, or how much of that was the art. Because, part of the freakiness of this was the art direction and the little stuff like that. Part of it, a lot of it, is the actual story itself. But I'm wondering, because one, I want to know who do I hit up for the drugs they were using when they wrote this thing, because, I want to sample some of this stuff, man.
That, I'm sure, was a combined effort. I'm sure Morrison laid out that he wanted lots of pop culture, references scattered throughout. Maybe it made some, notes about posters or things that he might have wanted in there, or maybe some, videotapes and things that he wanted labeled. But I'm sure, as examples, perhaps. Yeah. But I'm sure he didn't give the artist, specific direction, like, you've got to have this over by this foot or anything like that. I'm sure the artist, went and took that and scattered things throughout the apartment the way that, Morrison said things would be kind of like scattered. And I'm sure that was kind of a combination effort.
Okay.
Because, there's too many tiny details, and there's no way that Morrison would have laid out every little tiny detail there, other than, just to make reference to that's what it would look like that overall.
Well, for all we know, it could be Morrison's apartment.
He sent him photographic reference. Wait, it could be somebody. It very well could be somebody's apartment. Yeah. You actually got a point there. It could be a photographic reference of somebody's.
Yeah. Now, our first image of the Doom Patrol really is in this hospital sequence, and this was one of those things where I read it, I was like, okay, this is probably something that happened in the first volume, but it was a weird thing for me that my first dealings with these heroes wasn't anything, positive. It was, they're in a hospital. She's in this super coma that they don't know what it is. It's not a normal coma. There's something beyond, just the regular thing. And I'm like, what the heck happened? And then you're like, okay, this team is about tragedy, so far, and it's kind of like a reoccurring theme that this team is about tragedy, and whether it's overcoming it, dealing with it, burying the pain, and learning to live with your life as it is and not being able to fix it. So this was one of those things where first time read through I got one thing, second time read through this was a very telling of the nature of the Doom Patrol.
What I liked about it is the message I got out of this whole thing is it's about growing in spite of your weaknesses or in spite of your issues, because they all have this thing that they don't like about themselves, or that would separate themselves from being like Robot Man. You're not going to see him walking around the street typically, because people are going to freak out. He's an oddity, and these oddities band together and find a way to move on and to do something productive.
Yeah.
And they're very inspiring in their own ways with it. I was glad to see Robot Man first because I wanted that familiar connection. So this was the first part where I was kind of like, okay, I'm getting a connection now because I'm very familiar with Robot Man. So that was, for me, this was my first connecting point with the story as far as having a background to the character. And I needed somebody at this point, being in the first issue of it, that I could connect with, that I had a familiarity with. Let me ask you this. When you read this sequence, did you have an interest then to go back to find out what happened to her?
Yeah, that was part of the thing where I was like, okay, I'm curious what happened, in the first volume to put her this way. And this was a first read-through. It was just, okay, this is just a general build on something in the end, and I moved on. Second read-through is where I actually saw just the deepness behind the sequence, where it's like, as I say, I really see Doom Patrol as, adversity, either dealing with, overcoming, or learning to live with failure, or not even failure, learning to live with the complications.
Or to compensate for it. Even.
Yeah.
Because they are about compensating with for those things, and then finding a way to. In many ways, they find a way to utilize some of their issues as well. Because Crazy Jane is a great example of somebody who has major problems because of her past, but yet that is also her strength. So her weakness is also her strength. So they found a way to compensate and use weaknesses as a strength. Robot Man's a great example of that as well. His weaknesses, he doesn't have a body per se, but that's also his strength. Same thing with Negative Man. He's got all kinds of, there's three beings in there.
Yeah, that guy's got issues, and that's, that's a character who...
He's very enigmatic. I'm not...
I know what you mean.
I'm trying to say it, and I'm tongue-tied at the moment.
Yeah.
Enigmatic?
Yes, thank you.
Woohoo! We got someone who can speak.
Yeah. I'm tongue-tied at the moment with it, but he's one of those characters that you look at him and there's something that draws you to him. He's got a very powerful presence. And that powerful presence to me was something that came across in the moments where we saw him. They were moments of strength for that character, even though it was clear that there was issues there and things like that. Because he really kind of took a leadership role at those points in time.
Yeah, I really digged Robot Man, and he's one of the characters that you say how relate to and all that. I could see a robo whatnot, kind of thing where, if you had to say, okay, Jim, you pick one of the Doom Patrol, who do you want to be? I would actually probably want to be Robot Man. Take out the brain, slap it in a metal body, deal with some of the issues behind it, but I think I would rather be Robot Man than Crazy Jane.
I would love you to be Robot Man. To have
Robot
your brain
Man
in a
wears
jar.
Leather.
Yeah.
I'd love the bits where your brain was in a jar.
Yeah,
Like at conventions, able to put it down there, rub the brain of Sensei of the Whatnot.
I would fly from Korea for that opportunity.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be great.
Yeah. I touched the brain of the Whatnot,
Yep.
and all I got was this stinking shirt.
Okay, now we have to find a brain in a jar somewhere.
Yeah. But I also like it, too, if you were like C-3PO and had a switch on the back.
See, that's the thing. I wouldn't have that. They were like Data.
When your brain was in a jar, I'd have one installed.
Well, the second I'm put back in the body, I go, okay, now what did Sean do to me this time?
But I'd put it somewhere where you couldn't get it. It'd be like that itch on the back you can't reach. Like, I'd make sure you knew exactly where it was, because that in itself would be funny.
Just watching me reach for it, going, dang it, Norwich, what the heck you put it there for?
That has got to be one of the things I like about that character, though, is you imagine that guy had a body at some point. So, and that's the tragic story. Like, it's different if you never had one. And, this was like your life and you always did it. You don't miss it. But in the case of this guy, he previously had a body. So now you've got to deal with the fact that your life will never be like that again. No matter what artificial body they create for you, there will always be something it's what I like about Red Tornado, is what I like about this character. And it really worked in this particular storyline.
Yeah, and it's kind of like RoboCop. If you think about like RoboCop and then RoboCop 2, when they tried to make a second one, and all the people they experimented and put into these cybernetic bodies ended up killing themselves because they couldn't deal with the fact that they had these physical forms and they were, manly men, and now they're a machine. They couldn't deal with the strain of that. So there would be definitely some problems and issues and whatnot that would generate from that. And even every time in any of the sequencing where they take his brain out of his body in later parts of this trade, there is that discomfort that he has because he doesn't have any body now. Now he's just sitting in the jar hooked up with electrodes in him. So that is something I really did like about him and liked about the character.
There's a lot of pop culture references in this, like Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds they reference and things like that. Did any of this ever at any point in time, because it didn't for me, but did any of this feel dated to any of you, like reading it through? Because I felt it read very contemporary to me, but I don't know where you guys were at.
It never really felt dated for me. I kind of immersed myself in all sorts of weird stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s anyway, so I felt right at home with it.
Yeah, I didn't have any. What about you, Jim? Did it?
No.
Did it feel today, or because we've talked about it on the show before when we've read previous material? That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have like a dated issues or anything like that with this. It had a modern vibe to it. There's definitely references to the time frame, the fact that the Amigo Batman and the different posters and whatnot, but it's still. There was nothing lost to me. It wasn't like some of the issues I've had like with Silver Age stuff where I'm like, okay, this is just completely a different era, different period, and it took me out of the story. This was all just part of the story. Now, granted, part of this was some of the references was stuff from when I was a kid, so it's like stuff I knew. So I don't know if like a younger person would have like someone in their teens now reading this. I don't know what their reaction to this would be.
Well. And see, that's an interesting point. But even in the case, those references that we're talking about are referenced from the same standpoint that we're referencing them now. Because this was written in the late 80s, early 90s. So because of that, it still was stuff that at this point in time was nostalgia. Like the Amigo Batman was not out at this point. That's well beyond that. The Thunderbirds were, I think they were done at this point. There were old television shows like Mod Squad and stuff like that were not running at that point that he had videotapes of. So a lot of this, his apartment, like retro is cool right now. So this actually read very today for me because that whole apartment vibe was retro. So I was just kind of curious to see how that felt. We actually, when we're seeing Mr. Nobody, Nowhere Man with the fog, and we see the quiz with the whole dirt vibe with the quiz I was trying to get my hands around that, and I did like that the later issues they went back and explained backgrounds for these characters because that was it was intrigued. I was intrigued during this reading to learn more about the background of these characters, why they had their issues, and I was glad to see that Morrison gradually fed those things to us as the story went on.
Yeah, she definitely was, just an interesting thing. And I liked, the time they spent because they're building this team. They're building up this villain team. And, the fact that Nowhere Man could just, we talked about with Doom Patrol how they, take their weaknesses, make them strengths. And with her, he earned her loyalty right then and there when he gave her this super insulation suit that would completely seal her off from any and all germs. So right there, he just made a loyal subject, a loyal member of this team who would follow him anywhere. And I was like, damn, that's a good usage of this guy and a good way to build the team. And I like the fact that he's building his team from misfits. He wasn't going after the top-tiered villains and trying to make this mega power group. No, he was taking the rejects. He's a reject. He's pulling in the rejects. And it's one of those things where if you give somebody who their whole life has had nothing and has been told you're a loser, you give them purpose, you give them meaning, you give them, you make them a winner, they're going to be loyal to you. We always talk about supervillain teams where you always wonder, are they going to stab me in the back? This was a supervillain team where I wouldn't have worried about being stabbed in the back because there's loyalty in these team members, and we definitely see that at the end of this story arc.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember there's a funny twist there at the end, though.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, I know.
So that's and we'll talk about that when we get to that sequence. I agree with you to a certain extent, except I will say the other reasons why he didn't pick characters like you were suggesting is because of the whole Dada theme, what he was going for and what he was trying to do. These characters very much fit his own mission statement of what he was trying to accomplish. So it was funny when I first saw their costumes. I was almost groaning to myself because I'm like, oh, these can't possibly be. I'm like, they look like cheesy villains. They don't. And then when I actually saw them using their powers and how that all came together, I completely did a 180. But I remember upon first seeing the costumes for like Frenzy and the Quiz, because Frenzy's costume, you don't even see his arms.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, okay. And to me, that's anytime you're in a costume, it looks like it's almost constricting you. I mean, there's definitely a big flow to it. I didn't understand his power set yet when I had seen him, so I was like, all right, how is this person remotely intimidating? But we do see that as it goes on, and we do see how these characters work. That, to me, was the compelling thing. They took costumes that initially made me think cheesy and completely twisted me around to the other end where I was like, oh, when we find out what her deal is with dirt, her costume makes 110% perfect sense. So it all works out. It all makes sense. It all is interesting and compelling once you get it's one of those books you really have to, like, if you read one issue of this by itself isolated, you would lose so much of this story. This reads very well in a trade because you need multiple issues, I think, to get your head around it all.
The recruitment Frenzy, you see his recruitment in the first trade as just an epilogue to one of the issues, and you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And then he pops up in this, and you see him. One thing I wanted to kind of quickly bring up about when Jim was talking about being in the hospital and Rhea Jones in the coma. She gets put into the coma during the Invasion storyline, the big crossover. You don't even see that in the first trade. That's even before all that.
Did that happen during the Invasion?
It did. Yeah, the whole thing. That's how the Doom Patrol team started over. Was Cooper Bird's run ended during the Invasion storyline, and they all got put into the hospital or killed or maimed, and that's when Morrison took over.
I read those issues, and I have them still. I'll let you borrow them. I read those when they came out. So, I mean, it's been that many years. We're talking about that came out in the late 80s.
Oh, okay.
And I do have those issues. I'm going to pull them out just because he referenced them here, and they make sense. I'm going to pull them out and reread them. I know that's been collected in trade.
Now, what
recently.
invasion? What invasion?
There was actually a story. Remember the Dominators from Legion of Superheroes?
Yeah.
The Dominators invaded the Earth.
Oh, okay.
So that was that was when the Dominators had so recently appeared there. They had also had the Dominators, that original trade in the Invasion has been re-released. It was cool at the time, too, when the Invasion came out, they actually, as a promo piece, they put out an issue of the Daily Planet. And, I mean, an actual, like, it was a newspaper that was headlining about the alien invasion.
Cool. So it wasn't a secret invasion.
No, it was not. But that would be, I'd actually like to read it now because I never, obviously, at that time, I didn't have the budget to follow Doom Patrol. I never had followed, so I didn't even, when you mentioned that, I was like, I don't even remember that. I'd like to go back and reread it now, having read this with that context of how she got like this.
Yeah, so I still haven't read Invasion. I could kick myself because I really want to. I think I'm gonna order that this week.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and reread the issues, Jim, and I'll give them to you. So we'll go that route. Thanks for bringing that up because I totally didn't realize the connection was there.
Yeah, that was how Morrison. Well, that's how they got Cooper Bird to end it and Morrison to start it up because they were going to cancel it otherwise. I think it was selling very little back then.
I wonder how did the Morrison run do? Did it develop a following during this time?
I don't really know. See, I came into it. Actually, I picked this up just about 2 years ago when I started getting back into collecting and reading trades again. So I completely missed it the first time around.
It had to have done fairly well because, if you figure if there was enough material for 5 trades on a series they were going to cancel, it had to have developed enough of a following that it kept going and it just was able to sustain itself. Because it actually, I think it had a writer after this too, didn't it? After Morrison's run?
Yeah. What was her name? I'm trying to remember.
I saw it on Wikipedia earlier that there was a writer afterwards. So, I mean, this was a run that obviously it did well enough not only to sustain Morrison's run for 5 trades, but then also was revitalized enough that they kept it going beyond Morrison. So there had to have been enough of a following for them to say, we're going to keep this book going. So,
and it moved to Vertigo, too. They moved it over to Vertigo, and I think it lasted for a while. So for a while longer after Morrison. Rachel Pollack, she took over after Morrison. That's who it was.
They had a it was a similar journey to what was going on with Morrison's Animal Man, because Animal Man started out as a DCU book and then also transitioned over to Vertigo. But I think that was as Vertigo was getting started. Swamp Thing made the same transition. There were books that kind of had a Vertigo-esque feel to them that they kind of went over to that line. I think it's interesting that, to me, this Vertigo-y style book works very well in the DCU, because when we get to see the DCU characters in this, I really enjoyed that. I wish there was more. I think it's the reason why at conventions we still get people asking if Vertigo's one of the places in the DC universe, because people want to see this type of bleed through in certain Vertigo books where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we can't.
See?
I don't know. It would be great.
I don't know. I kind of like Vertigo being a complete separate entity.
I don't mean Vertigo as in the entire Vertigo line having a continuity or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, okay, let's go with Dead Man as a concept. And maybe that's not the best one. Sandman Mystery Theater. Okay, they did some crossovers with Sandman Mystery Theater and Starman. That, Sandman Mystery Theater was a Vertigo title. They did a Starman story there, not with Jack Knight, but it was with his dad. But it showed something in the past. It was with the Mist.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they had a DC Universe story crossing that over as well. It fits for that character, but I wouldn't do 100 Bullets set in the DC Universe.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you on that point where
I don't want to see Vertigo as a planet in the 52, but I don't know why you can't take a DC Universe concept and say, this would really work much better as a Vertigo title. Make it a Vertigo title, but be able to use some of the DCU characters as appropriate for that title. Now, like I said, it won't work for everyone. Like Preacher, no business being in the DC Universe. I don't want to see a book like that there. But this did work, and it worked very well, and I liked that these characters appeared here in this story that is very Vertigo-y.
Are you kidding? A Booster Gold Preacher team-up would be awesome.
Yeah.
You could do I think it would be a great opportunity to do some villain miniseries, some DC villain miniseries, but told as a Vertigo title. That way you could really kind of stretch out and do a little more with it. That would be good.
It's a good way to experiment, too, with those villains. Great example, the Joker hardcover. Did you read that one, the one that was just released?
Not yet.
Okay, I won't spoil anything for you. It's one of those things, though, that if you read it, it could easily have been given a Vertigo label.
I've seen some pictures on the net. It looks great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was and that's... as we're talking about villains, and that was the first thing that popped in my head, and there's a couple other villains they could really flesh out over there and have some fun with, and just not be afraid to disrupt the continuity police because it would be over in Vertigo. So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Now I tell you, the Robot Man and Crazy Jane, when they're sitting there having their little discussion and he's listing all the different personalities that are in her head, this is one of those sequences, again, that first time read through, I read it, I said, oh, okay, and I didn't think twice of it, but later on, when you learn more about these characters, you learn more about these personalities, you learn why and how they were created, this has a completely different feel as I was reading it, because, there's Robot Man trying to understand her, trying to, help her, work with her, and something like this isn't the kind of way I would go with her. And with what she had to deal with, where you're talking, getting her to just list the items, get to catalog it, like a directory. Well, a directory isn't going to be, beneficial to her. It's going to be more of her interaction, her connection to these things, why and the whatnot behind the different personalities. This is more of a mathematical, analytical, accountant type look of these personalities. And when you figure out how and why these are generated, that wouldn't be too beneficial for her.
As an accountant, do you label things as the whatnot?
Yes. Yes, there's,
You know what I really liked about her? This concept of the underground. And it's funny, they reference it right in the beginning of it. You don't really get a full grasp of it later until we're actually in her head. But that whole concept of the reason why she doesn't want to catalog them is because some of them are buried very deep into the underground for her own protection. They're there in the deepest, darkest reaches. Those personalities are there by choice, but it's actually her own mind protecting her from horrible memories or horrible situations, things like that. And I loved the concept that her mind was layered. Her mind is actually very organized.
Yes.
According to traumas and different issues that she's had to deal with, and the personalities are cataloged that way. She's a very compelling character. You could almost do a whole series revolving around her and her various personalities.
Oh God, yeah. She's definitely one of those, where there's so much more you could do with her, even after you explain everything, because who knows what else there is underneath it.
Well, and you could do whole issues in her head and interactions of her different personalities, in her head, because they do. And I mean, it was very interesting to be inside there and to see how he crafted this rich world inside her brain for really the purpose of explaining her powers. And it was just a very interesting, another tragic character, because whole personalities were kind of wiped out because of choice. And as another way, either they, because there was a way for them to deal, or because they couldn't deal. So that was really an interesting part. I loved Robot Man's reaction. You got this Robot Man who himself got this bizarre MO, and the stuff that she does is so over the top. That she has a very coherent, easy to talk to personality, but then gradually as she becomes more and more traumatized, another personality comes through and actually tries to end it all, which was an interesting, for him, a horrifying thing to sit through. Could you work with somebody like that? I mean, this is for both of you. If you were a hero, or if you were on a team, or if you were, in a squad, or any type of situation where you had to partner up, or work in a group with somebody, could you work with somebody who had a multiple personality disorder?
Probably not. I have worked with some strange people in my time, but I think that's pushing it.
What about you?
Well, I do a podcast with a crazy guy, so I think I could work with someone. Ryan, you walked into that one.
I figured you were going to go in that direction too, which I'm laughing about it. But no, I mean, she's a serious character. I mean, it's interesting.
So yeah, yes and no. I've dealt with a couple people that have had issues, and nothing to the extreme level we're getting with Jane. But it's one of those things where you got to take it. You don't know how you're going to react until you're actually presented with it. When I was in the branches, we had a client who literally had multiple personality disorder, and you didn't know who you were going to talk to. And depending on which personality you're dealing with is how you had to react to her. So you had to see when she approached you, which one are we talking to today? I had one, my first experience with her, I was an assistant manager, and I had no idea, she had this. Everyone, of course, in the branch knew. So they're all laughing when they saw her approach my desk, because they knew I was just about to go through a whirlwind of fun. And while she was sitting at the desk, she was flip-flopping, and she's been in and out of different institutions and using different medication, and she was at my desk at a period, I guess, when she was either off her meds or not taking them or something, because she really was just the extreme of multiple personality disorder. She was literally having conversations between one personality to another, and when she was talking from the one to the other, she would look at this empty chair, and she would talk to that empty chair as she's talking to that person. Then her facial expressions would completely change when she was answering herself. Now, by the end of this conversation, I'm looking at that chair thinking, there's somebody else sitting there. I started seeing the people there, and I was just like, whoa. And, and the ladies in the teller line were laughing hysterically because they knew exactly the craziness I was going through. And eventually we were able to, get her calmed down and get her shuffled out and, call the Euclid police because we didn't know what the heck to do with her, because we didn't know if she was just wandering or if she was, free from a hospital or if she was just, escaped or anything. And so it was a definite one of those stories where I tell and I have fun when I'm telling it, but at the time there was a bit of a because there's a fine line between psychotic and psychotic killer. So that's, you got to deal with that when you're dealing with somebody who's not 100% there. Where yes, this is your friend, this is your teammate, but who's to say one of those personalities isn't a homicidal killer? So you got this unknown factor.
I'm reading a book right now called Doomickey by Stephen King, and it's not so much a multiple personality disorder. What happens is this guy he goes through a horrible accident on a construction site, loses an arm, and there's mental trauma tin the sense that he takes like a blow to the head that he never really recovers from, so to speak. As far as there's references, he'll every so often act like what he calls old him, but then there's new him. And he loses his whole, his wife leaves him because of the fact that he has these violent fits and things like that. And it's all about him trying to find a way to move on, start a new life, and recover a sense of self, a new sense of self. And I was reading that, and I'm like, you're dealing with basically two personalities there, in the sense that every so often you see glimpses of old him, but then you see a new him that's trying to get a handle on life. And that's just two personalities. In this case, I really felt for her because I'm like, I don't know myself I'm a patient person, but I don't know if I would have the patience to be able to do that. I'd have to really like the dominant personality, if there was one, and have a really strong, I think if it was you or somebody, I was close to, if it was my wife or something like that, I would like to think of myself that if I had enough connection with the dominant personality, that I could work my way through it. But in this case, she really is off the wall, off the charts with what she's doing. And I'm like, I don't know how much of those type of extreme events, because you'd have to fear for your own life too, at a certain point. Not when you're Robot Man, but, even when you're Robot Man, she takes him down and takes out his brain.
Yeah. Robot Man can die. We see later on. It's, there's definitely, threats there. Now, the one thing going on when we see the background of Nowhere Man. Now, normally I'm the kind of guy who I don't like flashback, full flashback telling of a story of the origin. I like it kind of get intermixed in with the story, like we're seeing with the team. But with this guy, I didn't have an issue with this. One, it was such a super freaky story. I don't know how they could have intermixed it in with the story. But two, it did fit who this guy is. It did fit his nature and just the artwork, the change in kind of artwork style that for the flashback sequences than what we were seeing. So this was one of those things where it fit to me, and I liked this usage of a flashback to tell the villain origin.
I'm confused by what you're saying here.
Okay.
Are you saying in the sense that intermixed, like we found out through passing conversation?
Right. That's normally how I like to find out
a
character's
flashbacks.
origin.
Yeah, I do like flashbacks.
I normally I don't like just a flat out origin where it's a flashback where they say in the beginning I did this and then this and this and this. I'd rather like with the rest of the team, we're getting these origins, we're learning about them in different ways, and I like that more than this normally. But for this guy, I thought this was cool because it's just him telling his story.
But it was also showing how he's connected with Doom Patrol, Mushamala, and the all that stuff. It's connecting, him to the Brotherhood of Evil, and then it's basically, this is the big foundation point where you need at this point to understand why he's even gathering the Brotherhood of Dada.
It also kind of connects him to his Silver Age origins as well. Just that method of storytelling where you just do this elaborate flashback to explain, how you came to be like that.
Because it really does lay the foundation work for what the whole point of this Painting That Ate Paris storyline is.
Yeah. And And the thing I thought was cool about his origin was it was your basic kind of experiment gone wrong, but there was some seriously twisted nature to it. And just a little bit of tweak and some stuff that would explain why this guy is so bizarre and the way he is and operates. This was, just it had a lot of just whoa kind of moments for me as we're going through it. The initial experiments, they lock him in the white room, and delusions fade away to just plain just whiteness, and then even that alone itself can be maddening. And then he just sees that one little dot, and it slowly starts to move, and it slowly starts to get closer to him, closer and closer, and bam! It just basically encompasses who he is, and boom, Nowhere Man is out of all this. I was just like, man, this was another read through multiple times to really sink my teeth into it. But afterwards, I was like, I kind of understood why this guy was a bit wacky, and why he kind of would want to destroy the Earth or devour the Earth. He's not 100% there in his who he is.
I connected him a lot with the Joker. Because we always say that the Joker's like an agent of chaos, and when you take a look at this Nowhere Man, this Mr. Nobody, he's an agent of absurdity. He is absurd. He became this. Because, you look in the mirror afterwards and you see yourself and you look like this, it's bizarre, it's strange, it's absurd. And he collects these people specifically, and that was important because this told me why he gathered this group of people. They're bizarre, they're absurd, they're strange. Their powers are just out there. And he's trying to not only gather them, but he's trying to do things to bring about a world of the absurd, to be a celebration of the absurd. Like the Joker, he flows naturally in that direction. I'm not saying that he and the Joker have a different, absurd versus chaos. It sounds like, well, geez, you're saying the same thing, Sean. It's not. The Joker would go in a different direction, but it's the same thing. The Joker tends to try to bring about those type of things. This guy tries to bring about the strange, the absurd. The whole reason for going after this painting is to try and make the world in his image and the image of those that he's putting around him, because he feels that it does not work. The Brotherhood of Evil's outdated, in his eyes. It's not about good or evil anymore. It's about the absurd. It's about the strange, and let's celebrate that. Let's bring that about and bring everybody into that. And that, to me, was kind of like the whole, it's a wacky, bizarre, strange hook, but I liked that we got to understand what his whole MO was right from the get-go. So that flashback to me was brilliant, and I agree with you that I like that there's a history there with Doom Patrol, Dave, because you were bringing that up, and that to me it's kind of, I like that when a creator takes the time when it's possible to make a connection with the past, and it's not forced. It seems to flow naturally that you've got this character who's like the lost member of the Brotherhood of Evil who doesn't fit anymore, and you can modify him in such a way that he's now relevant to what you're currently doing, as opposed to, because he could have very easily made somebody new.
Right. Well, it's just, I don't know, I think Mr. Nobody's just a great character, and I like the idea of a Brotherhood of Dada, and just because, like you were saying, he is kind of similar to the Joker in that he wants to kind of bring about this kind of world of chaos, but also just kind of the absurd, and there's a certain freedom in that. And he was locked in this all-white room, this clean, this completely white room, and then he suddenly becomes this chaotic, absurd thing. And I guess he feels he was liberated by it, and he wants to do the same for everyone in the world.
Well, and that's a good point, because really, if you look at the society right now, we just had a conversation we were talking about, for example, Crazy Jane. In our world, in our way of viewing the world, she doesn't work. We all would have issues with it. So in this case, he's trying to construct a world, trying to change the world in such a way where it will free all of them. It will free the misfits of the world. It will free those that are absurd, that are strange. They don't need to change. They can't change in many ways, but they can change the world. And if you take a look, especially later on when we get heavy into Frenzy, you will see that these people all embrace that world and they find home in the strange and the bizarre. So it's an interesting story and a case study of people who are, of villains who are, well, I don't know if it's fair to even call them villains. Well, I mean, obviously killed everybody, so yeah, there is that element of it, but they skirt a certain line of,
definitely.
And I like that. I like gray areas. I don't want it with everything, but in this, it works that there's a gray area with these people that, he in his eyes, it's not about being good or evil. So I like this. It just really, this first issue read so much better reading it through again after I got a handle on this, and it was really a tremendous groundwork of where the rest of this goes, which is why I thought it was so important that we really kind of delved heavily into the foundations and the concepts that are laid out here, because it's really, once you get a handle on that first issue and where the story goes, everything else afterwards really cooks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the issue 27 opens up with another flashback, but this time about the painting. And I don't know about you guys, but the first time I read this, I kind of wanted more information on the painting. But then I was like, I wanted more information, but I was like, you know what? I'm hoping they tell it more in the story, and I learned that way. So I kind of like not having not a complete understanding of the painting. So as the adventure is going on, as the villains and or heroes are learning about the painting, I was learning. So it was one of those where gut reaction was like, that's it. And then I stopped and thought about it. I said, you know what? No, I kind of like having the limit, and I like being in the same line and mindset that everybody else is.
Well, what also worked there, too, is if you take a look pacing-wise, they had just done in the previous issue this big flashback sequence with Mr. Nobody. And to go and do that, for Morrison to go and do that again in this issue, at this point, I think you needed to get the story moving forward. So it was a good choice to give a tease of that, just to introduce the painting concept, give you a little, that there's a rich history to the painting, but then to gradually reveal it through the story at this point. I think he would have lost readers at this point had he not made that decision. So I think it was a good pacing issue, because you do get to that point. It kind of addresses what you were talking about with the first issue, why maybe you don't always like it, is because sometimes it derails or takes you away from moving forward progression. And we do need to feel, in a monthly serialized story, you want to feel a forward progression, like the story's actually going somewhere, and I think we needed that at this point.
One of the things I really liked about when Mr. Nobody's talking about the history of the painting, and it's one of the things I really like about the Doom Patrol, is that Morrison really pulled in a lot of influences from outside of comics. And one of his, I think, biggest influences with the Doom Patrol was Argentinian writer Jorge Borges. And one of the things that Borges does, or did in a few of his stories, is he would mix in factual, real people and attribute to them like fictional works, things that they didn't actually do. And he would also mix in fictional people as well, and so that what was true and what was fiction kind of blended together. And that's what he does when he's talking about the history of the painting, because some of the people he mentions, like Oscar Wilde, of course, and Austin, Osman Spare, and a few others are real, but also some of the people are fake. Max Bordengast, I believe, is not real. And, of course, Comte de Gille, I can't pronounce that, it's French, is not real. And I thought that was a really interesting technique. And especially if you go into the first trade, there's a huge, almost Borges tribute in the Crawling from the Wreckage storyline.
I like that, too, because it adds a historical time frame to the piece. To where how long the painting's been around, and that connection. I always appreciate if there's a way to bring in, like you said, when you're doing a fictional account, to also bring in the nonfiction to add a reference point to a story. It adds to me some depth, some historical significance. It makes it feel like it's part of the real world too.
It does. It's great.
Yeah, because you want to feel like, for me, it's very important in comics that I feel like the stories could happen. even when they're this wacky and out there. You know, I mean, I do want to feel like that this is escapism for me. It really is a very important part of this. So even in that moment where I'm experiencing it, no matter how out there you get, you do want to feel like this is happening. Like it's something that's actually, I want to be drawn in. I want to feel like this is happening. I mean, that's where...
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, when you think about it, we had very real-world conversations about multiple personalities and things like that and how that would go. And you have to really think about what would that be like. That just shows, though, that you're making a certain level of a connection to it. Like, how would these people work in the real world? Would we be able to deal with any of them? And I mean, to a certain extent, I almost, and that's the part where I'm even feeling bad about myself, and I'm like, these aren't even real characters, but I'm feeling bad that I'm like, I don't know that I can handle Crazy Jane for more than a few minutes.
That would be tough. That would be tough, and and you think if you actually started really sitting down thinking about everything she went through, you're just like, oh God, how could I even say anything nasty about her because of what she's done and what she's survived? So it's like, oh.
Especially if you consider that every personality has its own unique superpower.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes it doubly worse.
Yeah, because you never know what you're going to get at any point in time and what you have to prepare for, because she doesn't just have one or two personalities. She's got a whole library full of personalities, and even when you think you've got a handle on all of them, and actually that was what I liked about Robot Man. I know we're jumping back to this, but that's what I liked about him trying to catalog it, because he was trying to prepare for that. That's what I like. That showed his experience. It's the nice thing about when you have a new team like this Doom Patrol team, you also show the experience of the veteran. He's a veteran. He's dealt with and worked with some very wacky people. He's been through some very wacky events. And in order to make this team effective or make effective use of her, he would want to try and make concrete something that's abstract. Something that he doesn't, he can't quite get a handle on right now. And I liked that. It was important. It was a very scientific study of her that he was trying to do, which also fits Doom Patrol. So it's those moments where I feel like it's reality, and these are real ways of dealing with those situations. They're tiny details in storytelling that start to engross me, pull me in. The historical piece here, all of that, little tiny moments throughout the arc that are drawing me into a world and fleshing it out for me and making it three-dimensional and jump off the page.
Well, I think that I think you and I have a similar feeling that it's the little touches of reality and history that just make the fantasy that much richer.
Mm-hmm. 100% agree. And that is where these stories, I think it's the difference for me. There's a lot of comics that I read are good comics. I read them. I'll read them through once. I might go through them a second time just to get a handle on the story. But then, it's a good comic. I don't know that I'm going to rush necessarily reread it. I've got them in my stack. If I get interested in the future, I might go back to them. But that was my experience with them. But then a great comic is one where there's tiny details are there. We talked about the art piece in this. There's little tiny things that make me want to pick it up again and again. It may go into the box at some point in time, but I'll probably pull it out again to page through it. Maybe I won't do a cover-to-cover read, but I'll just kind of look through and catch little details that I've missed before. Then I might do a cover-to-cover read. That's a great story. And there are those differences that's where, my hierarchy starts, where you're saying, well, what's your top book to you? To me, top books are the ones where I will pick them up 3 and 4 times in a read-through, not just once or twice, because I want to go through and kind of look for little things, catch little details, and get more into the world. And that, to me, is a great comic when that happens. So...
Now, this discussion between Robot Man and Negative Man was another passage where first time through, I read it, I kind of understood it, and even now I'm still getting more of a grasp of it, and it's, I guarantee the three of us probably all had different experiences with this. This was one of those, kind of, okay, yeah, I see it. And the one thing I did really, 2 things I appreciated from it was, one, the art style they went with. Plain black background. You just have the two characters and those stackable dolls. I like that there was no clutter, no nothing around. It was just boom, that focus on that. And I thought that was a really sharp contrast, especially to what we're seeing before, after, throughout this thing, where it's a lot of background stuff, a lot of jumble, a lot of craziness. This straightforward boom, presentation was something that it really caught my eye. And I also like the fact that, yes, Robot Man isn't a normal guy, and Negative Man isn't a normal guy, and they have some common grounds, but even then, they still don't 100% know who each other is. And it's, I was like, wow, yeah, you'd think that two people who had very similar experiences would be able to, be on the jive, but they're not, though.
Well, and see, I took to the Outward world, too, as it's kind of showing right now that outwardly, his world hasn't fleshed out yet. I'm talking about Negative Man's. Because there's three personalities there that haven't fully integrated. So as far as what his world looks like right now, that hasn't finalized. So for him at this point, he's in a very transitional place. So and I liked when he walked in there, we got to see through this blackness that he hasn't quite fully realized yet. He, she, all of them together. Because, there's three very different entities inside there. There's a male, there's a female, very different cultural backgrounds between the two of them, and then all of a sudden you've got this Negative Man in there as well, and I liked that because it just set him aside as being almost alone, withdrawn into himself right now, purposely, because he's trying to let everything integrate, to try and gather that all together. And I really particularly enjoyed that piece because I wanted to see more of the Doom Patrol at this point because I hadn't read this Doom Patrol. And to see another character who I'm familiar with, Negative Man, more recently, to see this Negative Man and to know that there's that extra layer to the character, it's really something that I wish had stayed in the current run when they'd done it. Because I read John Byrne's whole run that he just did, and I enjoyed it. This was an element, though, that I wish they had kept because I think it's a very interesting and intriguing element with Negative Man. So
let me ask you: is Larry Trainor Negative Man in Byrne's run? I haven't read Byrne's run.
He is, but there isn't the multiple. It's Larry Trainor as Negative Man. There isn't the other person. The female, the doctor.
Dr. Eleanor Poole.
Yeah, that is not a part of it. It ignores that aspect of it and goes back to the original concept of Larry Trainor's Negative Man without that addition. So,
okay.
Now, do they show the merging of the three or the creation of Negative Man in any of these? Okay.
In the first trade.
Oh, okay.
That's all part of it.
Cool, because then he's a character that when this was all said and done, I still didn't have a solid grasp on him. I have a pretty good grasp on Jane and Robot Man, but he's still a very big, huge enigma for me. So that's another reason I'm looking forward to reading that first volume, just because I want to know who this guy is. I want to understand a little bit more, and I think I may actually even, after reading, I may go back and reread some of these passages, especially these type of passages.
He gets a lot more spotlight in one of the later trades. In a very cosmic story that is really interesting as well. I think it's in the fourth trade.
That was kind of the nice thing about this as I was reading it through. There's a spotlighting, obviously, of Crazy Jane through a lot of this. And it was nice because we got to learn more about the Doom Patrol characters and spotlights throughout this, but there was room for more. I wanted to know more. And that's good storytelling as well, where you're giving me lots of depth, lots of details. You're introducing these characters in the Brotherhood of Dada. I'm getting to know all kinds of interesting and unique characters, but yet there's still more I want to know. There's more to drive me on to read the next issue. And I could see very much why this run had such a cult following to it.
Now, as we move on with the story, we get the Brotherhood of Dada going after this mystic painting that's locked away, and this was a sequence I really liked. I gotta say, this was a cool team dynamic type fighting style, but it was also just this was for me kind of like, I want to say, a classic comic book moment where we see them working, we see them doing their thing, each one using their powers, and it was just I was like, man, this was like yeah, they're a little bit weird characters, but this wasn't like a freaky, goofy thing. This was solid, villain, solid, stealing, solid, just, comic book superhero type characters doing their thing. And it was kind of like a breath of fresh air for me, because this was the sequence where I was able to read through, understand what happened, and appreciate it without any headache. It was, just like nice. Wow. Oh, cool. Yeah. I liked how the painting, the collector there warns them. You don't know how dangerous it is. Yeah, of course we don't. We're crazy. It was just like stuff like, I was like, yes, this is a cool. It's like, oh yeah.
Now this character, was it Eisman? Is that his name?
Let's see. Got the trade here. I'm trying to remember. I wrote it down. But
was he? And the quick question is: was he in previous volumes, or was this like his first?
I think this was his first appearance. I don't know for sure, but I want to say this is his first appearance.
Well, he wasn't in volume 1.
No, not at all.
Okay, I guess I didn't know if this was a creation that Morrison had used previously. Yeah. He was an interesting character because there seemed to be... Does he appear then in later volumes?
No, you just see him in this.
Okay. And he really only fits the storytelling. I didn't know if he was going to be a reoccurring character or not. A lot of depth introducing this character and kind of the outline of the painting, and that he collects unusual artifacts and objects like this, because they even talk about the ghost shirt and all kinds of other things, that he is a collector of strange and bizarre, mystical...
Yeah.
He fits into the story, and I kind of chuckled when after they go and they steal it and they leave, and he's kind of like, if he really isn't like, oh my God, we must get it back, rush on. No, he's like, okay, let them deal with it. Hey, 2 of my guards were just turned into giant, glass statues. He's like, I guess the day isn't a complete loss. And I'm like,
well, yeah. And you know why he said that? Because now there are artifacts and objects he can put in the museum.
Yeah.
Which is what I really liked. It fits his whole MO that, like, okay, now I've got another strange, bizarre antiquity that I can collect here. I think he also thought that eventually the painting might somehow come back his way, knowing the nature of it.
But I love, like, one of some of the things in his collection. He has, like, bullets used in the assassinations of Gandhi, Kennedy, and Lenin, and if you place them under your tongue, you get visions of the future.
Yeah, which is, it's...
Yeah.
But wait, who would try that?
Well, I'm up.
I'm debating. I'm like, man, I don't know. Part of me.
I guess my point is, who originally discovered that works?
Yeah.
Like, if you get a bullet from, like, that shot Gandhi, you're going to say, I need to put that in my mouth.
Yeah.
Like that the first man to get milk from a cow.
Yeah, like, what it was, I'm going to try squeezing that udder. I mean, like, who does that?
A pioneering spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, you got to be a little bit of a weirdo, too.
It makes you just think of how many experiments that people, hey, I wonder what if this would happen, that really just failed horribly wrong.
Yeah. Well, the babies seem to like it. Maybe I will.
Yeah. This is... And it's funny because we keep throwing out the term bizarre and odd as we're talking about this, and even this small supporting character who was in and out and done with, but he's still just, there was some in depth going on with this guy, and we can probably create just in our own head who this guy is, what he is, maybe come up with a little weird background for him and whatnot, and look at him in future episodes. Oh yeah, we could see him here, we could see him here, and that's just, for me, is just a statement of powerful writing, that this blip on the screen is somebody that is just as fascinating.
What works for me as well, though, is that we say the bizarre, but when you take a look at the world's reaction to the bizarre in this, it's very realistic. And that's where it works for me as well. That we, especially when we start getting into the Paris sequence, the reaction of the police, the reaction of, when we see people, normal people, reacting in this to the nonsense that's going on around them, it's very realistic, very grounded, very real world based, which adds to the bizarre nature, but also to me added to the, wow, this could really happen. This, wow, look at what would happen if it did, and what that looks like. And those are the moments that I really latched onto. So there is a reality to the kookiness
Yeah.
that connects you to it.
Yeah, the reaction to the red shirts, if you really want to call them what they were, because when Brotherhood of Dada show up at Paris with the painting, the police, you knew what was going to happen. You knew they didn't have a chance against this team, and I was just like, okay, just slap the red shirts on them, call them fodder, and be done with it, because these guys are about to get toasted. And it wasn't even a traditional toasting. One guy got turned into a commode. I'm like, come on now, how do you think of that one?
Yeah,
Do you
a commode
think
with
it-
flowers coming
Yes.
out of it.
Do you think any
Well,
birds were actually harmed in the making of this?
What?
Do you think any birds were actually harmed in the
No,
making
I
of
don't
this?
think so. I don't
Okay.
think so. But yeah, I am told I'm not going to say it. We're talking about flowers coming out of the commode. I'm like, I've been told mine smell like roses. So
By who?
by people.
Who are these mysterious people?
Well, maybe they're in my head, but still,
Is it the mysterious they?
yeah, it's them. It's they. It's others.
The Brotherhood of Dada.
Because it wasn't
Amen.
me.
Now, I also liked in Paris we did get a little bit more of an explanation on what the Brotherhood of Dada is, or who, or how, and I was just like, because that was something that was getting to me a little bit. I'm like, why Dada? That's ridiculous, and that's the nature of the Brotherhood of Dada. It's nothing and everything. It's the point where yes and no and all opposites, merge and meet, and it's the absurdity of life. And I was like, okay, it makes sense now. I get it.
Yeah. Well, Dada came out of World War One as a way to, because I don't know, World War One really scarred a lot of people mentally in Europe because it was just so horrible, and it was an ideology that kind of came out of that as a way of rejecting logic and embracing chaos, and it just kind of came out of that the whole time.
Okay, see, I didn't know Dada was an actual real thing. I thought it was something he just came up with.
Oh no, it was a real art movement way back in the day.
Which is fitting then that they pull
Yeah.
an artistic piece.
And it's also fitting for Morrison, who likes to pull from various stuff. And okay, wow, you know what? I'm getting more of an appreciation for this book as we're talking, just because of that. If I had done research, I would have actually known that. Oh well, nothing like being prepared.
The really absurd piece to this whole thing, though, is when we see what happens with the painting, with what it does with Paris. You see the multi-layers, and the fact that they deliberately pulled them. They weren't like your typical evil villain will trap something for the purpose of controlling it. In their case, they were trying to create their own world, to craft their own world. They captured Paris for the purpose of putting themselves in there as well. So, which is an interesting difference between the Brotherhood of Dada, and they were making their own world that fit their, whole way of life, their whole philosophy, and who they really are. So that was, to me, the interesting part of that. There wasn't a monetary benefit to what they were doing. They weren't looking for that goal. They, which was an interesting twist. I guess you could say, to a certain extent, there's the world domination aspect of it that does fit, that type of character. So, I mean, there is that element of it, but it wasn't. They aren't crooks in the sense that they stole the painting for a specific goal, and I guess it would be more like world domination and changing and manipulating the world into something that makes more sense to them in its nonsense.
To what Sean was just saying about changing and manipulating the world, if you look at Mr. Nobody's pose, where he's shouting, "It works," doesn't that remind you of Ozymandias in The Watchmen?
Oh, yeah.
When he says, "I did it." It looks, it's the same pose almost.
And very, and an interesting parallel to what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
Very cool. I liked that ending, though. That was very compelling to that issue, to see them basically in an area where it was just nothing, to see them inside the painting, but then to see nothing left there because, Paris at this point had been yanked away.
Yep.
Now, I know a lot of people who had said, okay, that's a good first start. We got rid of Paris. Let's get rid of the rest of France.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's me. I'm saying I know people who would say that.
Is this that mysterious them again?
No, this is a lot of different.
Are these? Wait, let me ask you a question. The people would say that. Are they the same people that say that you're?
No. These
smells like flowers.
No, these are real people. These are real people. I have a lot of various friends.
Because that sounds like somebody who would say that.
No. These are real people. I have a couple friends in the military who, France is not. The French people are not their favorite people, just because of a lot of their stances on some of the war on terror and their lack of participation and the various events that the French government has kind of like thumbed their nose at the U.S. military. They're like, screw them. Let's just let's get rid of France and just get rid of it altogether. So I'm not saying me. I'm saying these are people. So.
I have nothing against the people of France. I have something against the people that think you smell like flowers.
Right. Yeah. Well,
the first two issues of this were really. I liked the cliffhangers in them. They were good placement of them. They're good hooks to the next issue. I think one of the things I appreciated as I was reading through this collection, and it's something I hope we see more of. It's nice now that none of this was written as a part 1 of 5, or I think a lot of times nowadays there's that. Quote-unquote accusation of writing to the trade, and I do think we're starting to see more of where writers aren't afraid to do 2-issue stories or 6-issue stories or 8-issue stories or whatever, and we see certain things that are split across multiple trades. Even the current JSA arc, for example, is being spread across 3 different hardcovers. So I'm glad to see that, because you're not limiting now storytelling, because this really works. Like, I'm going to pick up Volume 3 of this because I enjoyed this. I'm going to go back and read Volume 1 of this because I enjoyed this, and it doesn't really matter to me that, like, I actually liked the hook that there's an epilogue in the previous volume that does lead into this with Frenzy, so I want to read that in the context that I enjoyed this, and I want to see, even if it's just a brief thing, how it kind of teased into this. This is proof that really trades work, whether they fall neatly to the complete storyline being in the trade, or you've got a storyline and then other stories that are told within the trade as well. It's a serialized environment, so I think trade collectors can enjoy just as much what the monthly fan gets out of reading a serialized storytelling. It's just a serialized trade versus a serialized monthly book. And you can read arcs of it or portions of it or collections of issues of it in a volume, and it works just as well as whether or not it's A to B in one volume.
And also, when you have collected trades of like a writer, like if you have Geoff Johns' Flash run or things like that, it tends to, you just really get a feeling of what the writer was going for with the characters, instead of the trades that move just storyline to storyline to storyline.
You can actually see some depth and growth, and that certain things in the beginning of the run were foundation pieces for elements that pay off in the later part of the run too, which is nice.
Right.
Yeah. And it was funny, I was thinking, like, how hard would it have been to follow this monthly? Because of just the nature of this story, the fact that we're reading from issue to issue to issue, we got the flow. If you had to wait a month between these, I think it would be a little bit tough. Then I'm thinking about like RAP stories and Final Crisis, where I'm going back and I'm rereading this stuff. And I think this has had to be one of those series where you did the exact same thing, where you would actually have to pull up the previous month, reread it, then reread the current month, and that type of style.
I never mind that if I'm enjoying the experience. I mind it if it feels like a chore, in the sense that, but if, if the end result is you read it 3 or 4 times and you're like, I'm not even liking this, that to me is a pain in the neck. But if I'm enjoying the experience and I'm getting, like, if I do another read through and I get more and it gives me more bang for my money, and I feel like I'm noticing elements in the first couple issues that I didn't notice before. that's actually a brilliant example of that. RIP, the 3rd issue, when that came out, I reread the first 2, and the first 2 had so much more meaning to me after the 3rd issue came out than they did the first time around. Like, I wasn't as into the story until the 3rd issue hit. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa! And that type of thing...
I think you know how I feel about RIP. I posted that long thing. Then I figure if I'm not rereading a comic, then it's not that good.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
That's what I said before. Like a good title for me is one that I'm enjoying the monthly experience of reading it. I'll read it a couple of times. I kind of move on. But my great ones are ones that not because, and a lot of times it's not even because of what we're discussing here, just out of pure enjoyment of being able to page through and look at the art again, or be able to read certain dialogue segments. I will page through them again 3 and 4 times just because it was such a fun and experience. That really is for me the measuring stick of a good comic versus a great. I'm reading lots of good comics that I'm glad I'm picking up. They're good reads and all that. There's a shorter stack of great comics that fit into their ones that I will read and reread. So it's not always to understand something or to grab something beforehand. Sometimes it's just because it's just fun to do that, and I do think that there is that element to it.
Yeah, the current Booster Gold run, not to digress, but that's just that's a reread and reread. It's just so much fun.
And that is, you're right, you get a very different vibe out of that one. That's a run that I feel like we don't talk about enough because of it. And it's fitting that you bring up Booster Gold anyway with where 28 heads, because we do have, do get to see some Booster Gold in this. And this was, to me, again, a point where I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with this concept that we have to have Vertigo and the DCU completely separate. I think on a title-by-title basis, you can make the decision if it's appropriate, and you're doing it. And I'm not saying that I'm saying we should have like 10 titles in the Vertigo universe that are interconnecting. Even if it's one that appropriately has a reason to do something like what 28 does right here, it works. Now, I do realize that this 28, when it came out, was not a Vertigo title yet. But I don't think that it matters if it makes the leap or not. Sometimes something just has a Vertigo vibe, and there's nothing wrong with plopping it in Vertigo, and it being, just saying this is more of a mature reader's title. It happens to have connections to the DC universe. You will see it bleed over at times, and that just works. I don't see why you can't do that. And I think it was just an interesting point for me because it comes up a lot at cons, and I'm not a fan of the question that comes up where people are saying it should be part of the multiverse. Well, no, it shouldn't, because it's a line of comics, not a universe of comics. And that's the huge distinction for me. None of them should be forced to be interconnected. There's no reason for that.
No, definitely not.
But this worked. So I just... And that I can see why... This made me realize why people ask the question.
And it kind of like Simon Dark. You could take Simon Dark, put it over in Vertigo, but still have connections that it is Gotham. That it is, maybe you may see a Batman flash or hear some reference of Batman, even though it's a Vertigo line book. Something like that, looking at current titles, that is something I would see. And so, that could be a cool thing.
And honestly, I think if it was a Vertigo book, I think there is an audience that maybe has not tried Simon Dark, and that's not. I haven't even looked at the numbers on Simon Dark. I don't mean it that way, but I think there is a Vertigo audience that maybe wouldn't have picked up Simon Dark that would really find a lot to like in a Simon Dark because it had a Vertigo label on it. So I think sometimes there's some books that it's definitely a Vertigo title. If you look at it and you read it, you're like, Fallen Angel by Peter David is a great example of a title that always should have been a Vertigo book. For anybody who read that run, I think to a certain extent you have to agree with that. That title, I think, missed its audience, especially if you're reading it when it went over to IDW. That's a great example of a title. I'm not going to spoil anything here for people who haven't read it, but it's a great example of a title. It left DC Comics, went to IDW, and that title became even more a Vertigo title over at IDW. And I'm like, if it was placed there to begin with, I think it would have had a very different audience, but still could have been set in the DC universe. And that's something I think that I'd like to see them consider more, because I think there's an audience for certain books in the DC universe that, not a ton of them, but there's every so often that special title. And Simon Dark is a great, Jim, you brought up a great example there. That's a book that I think would do very well as a Vertigo title and would have a bleed over audience in both, as a Vertigo title set in Gotham. Yeah. So
now it was funny when we got the JLI or JLE or whatever they're called in this version, and you get the Doom Patrol showing up. I kind of chuckled at this because you got Robot Man who wants to be in a way he wants to be more accepted. He wants to be a little bit more out there. But his first dealings with Animal Man, he's a bit of an ass to the guy. He's like, "Oh, you must be Robot Man, and you must be the guy who states the obvious." I'm like, dude. Come on, you only get one chance to make a first impression there, Robot Man. You probably should be a little bit nicer.
Yeah, that was a great line.
That was really realistic to me, though, because people who typically want to be accepted like that will sometimes come off and try to make themselves seem more superior than they actually are. So that to me read very real. Like he would carry himself that way a little bit and would be off-putting because he's trying to compensate for his own issues of not fitting in at that point. And trying to make it seem like I'm just as much of a veteran as you are, I know, and when realistically, you're right, he should be embracing this relationship.
Hey, that whole sequence could have had a completely different spin on it. Had he been like, "Oh yeah, I'm Robot Man. How you doing? Great to meet you." So what do we got here? And then you let the guy you let the responding officer give you the briefing. Because that way the responding officer feels that, they're part of this investigation. Granted, they're going to have nothing to do with it, but it makes them feel a little bit better. You have your specialists moving in. They're going to take over the investigation. They're going to take over the situation. But how you deal with the people who were first there really sets up, future relationships as well as, a general vibe going forward.
But it was important. One thing I liked is, first of all, they used our heroes to show how weird the situation was. Because they were really out of their own element. And their reaction to it was like, how did they do that? But I even liked the moments when Booster first sees Crazy Jane. And what do you think you're looking at? Me? Nothing. So I'm nothing, am I? Jane, we need some help here. I didn't say that. Don't get upset. That's just Hammerhead. And then you see, it's got to be, Blue Beetle. That's Crazy Jane, the one with multiple personalities. It is just kind of a strange situation. And I love how she switches on a dime. Yeah. Where she's like almost apologizing for the other personality, but she's real upbeat and happy about the whole thing. So those type of elements I thought were really great about seeing the DCU heroes here.
Well, I took it the apology one wasn't actually Jane apologizing. That was like another personality. Maybe like that baby doll we see later on apologizing for Hammerhead.
Oh, sure, to compensate for the situation.
You had one extreme goes to the other extreme.
Because we know that the personalities do. Right. There's probably personalities that are in place to react for negative vibes from other ones. Really does fit for this.
Yeah, and that's another sequence that after later on, issue 30, I reread that and I saw it completely different with her, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's cool. So it's the more you get invested in this title, the more you get invested in these characters, the more you actually enjoy the read through and the even after our discussion we're having, I'm enjoying this more than I did when we first started when we first started recording the show. So it's, this is kind of a cool process.
I love the art segments when we see Labyrinths, the title of this particular issue, and we see the Doom Patrol inside the painting for the first time. I love the personality of each member of the Doom Patrol here. You see Robot Man with this stance of at ready not just for a possible physical confrontation, but also at ready to analyze the situation. I like that we see Jane like almost with kind of a fearful look on her face, like in the sense it's almost like her mind's reacting with what's going on here and what do I throw out there? What personality do I need to throw out there? And it's almost like I don't know if distress is, it's not quite that level, but it was kind of a confusion almost. The confusion's probably better what I'm looking for. But then again, and taking a look at Negative Man in that vibe, the way he's carrying himself in more of an ethereal kind of mysterious manner of analyzing the situation. There's a confidence there, but even it's like a long, straight, floating pose to him.
Yeah, I like the fact that to actually trigger the painting, it wasn't just looking at it that triggered it. You had to have that paradox. You had to have that, that conflict, and that is the Brotherhood of Dada, but it is also Negative Man and the Doom Patrol. They are conflict within a shell. So I like that it wasn't just something as simple as cut and dry that anyone can trigger the painting. You got to understand it. You got to get in the groove.
Yeah, Negative Man is the one that triggered it because of the fact that he's a male and female. He's a black and white in one body. So it is a contradiction, and he was he realized that he was the doorway in. He was the key to get in there. And that totally worked for me as well. It added a lot more. I remember in my second read-through when I read through this particular sequence, after I had a handle on what his deal was, and I looked up some information on the fact that he was, in fact, two people and this entity in one body, that whole sequence read so much better to me. I'm like, oh, that's really good to know a little bit about him. So we're in a really great era where when you're reading something, if you want to look it up, to go to the internet and to be able to get some background on something really quick to add to your, if you haven't been reading a title, we can go and look it up and find out information about characters through Wikipedia and for other things on the internet through your comic book DBs and stuff instantly, and then it adds some depth and background to our storytelling that we're reading, which is nice.
Yeah.
I use both constantly.
Yeah, I do as well. I can't help it.
It's kind of funny that we got everything set up while we're reading. We got this here. It's in a way, it's no longer just the sit down. Okay, yeah, nice read. You're doing research. You're doing it.
I would have killed for this as a kid.
Yeah.
As a kid, there were a lot of titles.
Too.
Yeah, I jumped on titles, and it sounds like you had the same experience, Dave. I jumped on titles partway through runs, and you couldn't get the back issues always. We didn't have that luxury of being able to say, well, the trade's going to come out, so I'll jump on board and reread the trade. It was really, you picked up 2 or 3 issues, and you had to wait, Jim, when you were asking before, how is it to wait for a month? You would read the first issue, and you had to make a decision on that first issue. Am I going to read the second? And then you read the second, and you're still... I remember when I read a great title, for example, this Uncanny X-Men. I read that. I was just starting to get a handle on them at the end of the first issue, sort of. But, it wasn't until multiple read-throughs of that issue and then the next issue and the next issue that I got an idea on their background and who they were and things like that. But you had to make that decision based on that. You didn't have the luxury of saying, okay, I want to know something about Wolverine. If you were lucky at the comic shop, you could talk to somebody. But other than that, there was no internet. There was no, And usually, like in my case, my friends were always reading different titles than I was. So they weren't even...
comic shop.
Yeah.
It was a grocery store that had a spinner rack. That's all we had.
And if you got one issue, maybe if you were lucky, the previous issue was still available at a different grocery store or at a different drugstore or something. It was a convenience store it was called Lawson's. And it was like your 7-Elevens, things like that now. They had a spinner rack of comics, and right next door there was a pharmacy. And they happened to have a magazine shelf that had comics on it. I got lucky every so often that if I picked up a title, the other issue was available next door. And I would beg and plead my mom to let me have that other issue because I wanted to get into a story. So we're very lucky nowadays that...
they have Lawson's over here.
So it's still available?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a Lawson's over here in some of the larger cities. We have 7-Eleven, of course, but yeah, you'll see a Lawson's here and there, especially up in Seoul.
So that's odd because its Lawson's are gone in this area.
Completely
Gone.
They were bought out. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, inside the painting, this was one of those where I had really multiple read-throughs for me to comprehend the true nature of what is the painting and just the whole physics and everything behind it was still kind of a little bit jarring for me. And I did like, though, that in the painting, the heroes initially, throughout this entire thing, were, on the receiving end of a butt-kicking. And, the Brotherhood of Dada, they had this thing down because they are such... the conflict and the contrast within themselves, and they understood what is the painting, and they kind of had the ultimate home court advantage. And this was some cool villain stuff because you see the classic divide and conquer, and then it actually works for them in that they're able to defeat the heroes. There's a point in time in this book where they won. It had... had other things not happened to them, they would have actually been the victors of this, and who knows what else they would have been able to pull off.
An important thing about this issue, too, though, that really grabbed me was the fact that we got to see the villains through the hero's eyes. Negative Man, before we even get into the fights, is bringing everyone up to speed on who the Quiz is, Frenzy, Sleepwalk, really kind of just showing us, reminding us as the reader their MOs. And actually at this point, we still haven't gotten a whole lot about that. So it was another feeding of depth and understanding of these characters. But it was helpful to know that the heroes now knew something about them. Also, we found out here that when Jane switches personalities, she doesn't necessarily know what the other personality has said. So there was that whole little bit where she was revealing something about the painting earlier, and she no longer remembers that. So it was an interesting little thing about her personalities that they aren't communicating necessarily.
Yeah. I love all the backgrounds of the paintings as well. All the different art movements and stuff and everything just kind of changes depending on where they are.
Yeah, and what the theme is of that particular place and those layers.
Yeah, it's it's a personalized kind of like dimension within dimension within dimension, which actually plays out a little bit later when we talk about Jane and just her layers of her psyche. It's the same type of structure, which was one of those things I was like, okay, I can see, and as I said, literally multiple read-throughs just to understand how the flow-through and all that. And as I said earlier, with the fight sequencing, when they went from one to one, they did a part of one fight, part of another fight, part of another fight, and just jumping around, my head was spinning. But once after I'd read the entire fight sequence, I knew how it ended. I was able to go back again and read just the Robot Man fight, just the Jane fight, just the Negative Man fight, and I saw these really cool just battles and just seeing how they were interconnected. I really just kind of ate this up. It was a beatdown. They really just, you start off with Sleepwalk just cracking, Robot Man, and then later on Quiz gives him the final, death blow. Literally, they see that, hey, that nutrient container there, that's kind of feeding your brain. Wonder what happens if we destroy it. Boom. Robot Man's down, gonna die very shortly. Negative Man dealing with, Quiz, and he was throwing out the different powers. She first flies in.
But nothing abstract. He was pulling from powers that he had seen.
Right.
And that was the thing with the Quiz. The Quiz is powers that you haven't even thought of.
Yeah.
And that's and I loved that.
And she catches him by having the power to create a spirit-containing jar. Boom. He's down. And I was just like, oh, that is awesome. I just then we get to Fogg trying to consume Jane, which I thought one, it was cool how this leads to future parts of the story, but also just the fact that this is a guy who consumes souls with his power, and this is a multiple personality person. So naturally, it's not just going to be a quick yum, 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 quick snack. He's going to be in for the long haul, one after another. And then as the one's going, she's like, oh no, not that one, not that one. I was just like, oh, that is just a cool dynamics to their fight sequence and everything beyond it. And the fact that it just, I was like, wow,
that was great.
It was an interesting ending because it seems like they've won, but then they come to the harsh realization that there are elements of their world that they've crafted here that they were not prepared for. And that's when we get into this fifth horseman thing that was, to me, really interesting.
Yeah, and just the fact that I laughed when Sleepwalker actually wakes up and she has the premonition about the fifth horseman. He's awake and he's arisen, and that talk about a cool cliffhanger ending for the issue. That was another one. This is we're seeing some pretty cool stuff here with these issues where it leaves you going, what's going to happen next? Oh my God, hey! I
love this bit with Mr. Nobody. Yes. There's enough room in here for everyone. The whole world, Lloyd. We could do anything we wanted. Paint faces on Superman's bare bottom. Use Batman as an ashtray. Yes, let's make them all suffer. Let's do it. Let's do it now. And we see here that there is a little bit of world domination, megalomania coming on here as well.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of everything in him. And I noticed how he didn't mention Hawkman. He's going to leave Hawkman alone.
That's because he knows better. That's because he knows better. And that actually shows intelligence.
Yeah. Well, hey, no one said Nowhere Man isn't an idiot. He's just a little bit bizarre and a little bit out there. But the man does have a plan, kind of, I think, sort of.
Well, and that's where he's a lot like the Joker.
Yeah.
In the sense that when you're going with the absurd. What'd you guys say about me when I was gone? Was it nice? I can check.
He was talking trash.
Yeah, we were talking trash.
Well, then it's going to be edited out.
Actually, here, let me show you something we were talking about. I got an email from somebody, and figured we'll get a recorded reaction, your recorded reaction to it.
Okay.
You know, our good friend Mike Sims was nice enough to create a Norge of Zurana.
Oh, this will definitely be on the website.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, but I figured
that means,
I'd get the live reaction.
This isn't fit for airing then, because the way you send me things, it'll be this time next year that you actually get it to me. So,
dude, I will send it to you as soon as we are done recording. I have it all ready to go.
That is really, really funny.
Don't keep me in suspense. What does it look like?
It's really hard to describe.
I know.
It's like I'm in some bizarre clown suit, but twisted.
Yeah.
It looks like it looks like a clown mixed with a demented Cat in the Hat having a bad hair day. Not that I have a good one as it is, but
wow. That was not. Yeah, I know. I don't know where he got the original.
Cool.
You know, whether this is multiple piecework or...
I look like a witch that went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
This is really This is probably one of the funniest ones I've seen in a while.
And when when I send this to Sean, I'll forward it on to you as well, Dave, so you can see it before it actually gets posted.
Yeah, and for anybody listening to this, if you go to listener created content, you click on Where's What Not Now, and you'll find it there.
Yeah.
So
the one I did, the Norja Zurinar, Jim and I were talking, I was most proud of the Jim is Batmite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I thought that one turned out really good.
Did I put that one up on the website yet?
I thought so, because I've seen it.
I've got all the ones. I keep...
Unless you forwarded it to... No,
I use them... what I do is I leave them in the email until I've done a bit... I do an update with 4 or 5. I'll have to double check and make sure that's up there. I've got it. It's in the... If it's not up there, it's still in the email.
I know I've seen it, but did you post it on the forums or...
Yeah,
he did. Yes.
Okay, so that's where I probably saw it.
He emailed it to me as well, though, because for the website, and that will go out. If it's not up on the website, it will. I'll put it up with this because that'll be kind of funny to see different variations of Norge of Zurana. So anyway, Doom Patrol number 29.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, here's the thing I really digged about this one was the insight into Frenzy.
Probably my favorite issue.
You know, and this was
great.
This is one of those ones where I didn't completely understand everything that was going on until a little bit later. I kind of just thought, okay, yeah, just a little bit on Frenzy, give us some update. Oh, okay, that's cool. No, it's part of the story. We're seeing Frenzy say what happened, in this mission, how everything played out. And I was like, oh, this issue basically is Frenzy's point of view on everything that's going to happen. I like that. And
I love that it was told as a letter in inventive spelling. Because, I teach third graders. I have kids every year that have issues with inventive spelling, where they just don't have a strong spelling background. And that's something we have to work on during the year. So when I was reading this, I was totally eating it up because I'm like, the reality of this is very much, obviously he's had some experience with language. He's had some experience with writing. But he has not had a strong experience with writing and language. So we're seeing here how some of his language issues, because of the lack of education that he's talking about, are bleeding over into his writing. And I ate that up because there's many a time where I'm looking through trying to figure out what words the person that my students are trying to say, because they're doing the same thing. And their concept of sounds, that you see them bleed through into their inventive spellings, but they aren't doing the correct spelling of it. So you got to work through it. This issue for me was easily my favorite out of the batch because of, I really felt like I was being talked to by Frenzy.
Did you want to pull out the red pen?
I had to hold myself back. And I actually, that's the hard part is when I have students on this level with Frenzy, because as a third grader, you want to, you want to have a positive element to it, and you don't want it to all be read all over the place. So you'll pick high frequency words, words that are smaller that everybody should know and that type of thing, and start with those. So I would not have at least with third graders. With an adult, I would circle everything, but with even with an adult, if it was an adult in this particular case, where they're going back, I would treat them the same way because you want to give them a chance of success. So in this particular case, I would have pulled probably the same thing, the high frequency words and the smaller words, and start with those, and then you build off of that. deer, for example, instead of DEER. You start teaching here that there's two different spellings to the same word, and go for that one. It was. I connected with this totally for my job.
And I like the fact that when earlier, when they're first talking about the paintings, Fogg knew about the different paintings because his parents were into all the romantic, artsy type scenes. Frenzy even makes a comment saying that he's not educated. He doesn't know anything. He's like, oh, you're the super smart guy here. I don't know anything. And we're seeing this uneducated guy, but we're also kind of seeing his motivation behind this. This is a guy who his whole life has been told by his mother, of all people, the person who's supposed to be that nurturer, that supportive thing, saying, you're going to be nothing. You're a nobody. You're a zilch. Well, now he's no longer a nobody. He is basically the lord of all he surveys. This power that he's gotten, I could see exactly why this guy would leap into an unknown fake world, because it's better to be a champion and lord of a fake world than a nothing in reality. And I ate that up.
She said he's always going to be a nothing because he can't even tie his shoelaces.
Right.
Yeah. That was the bit that I totally ate up.
Also, Mr. Nobody recruits him. He's homeless. In that one panel, in that one page in the first trade, he's a homeless guy.
Wow. And
Mr. Nobody recruits him off the streets, basically.
See, once again, just more perfect recruitment on Nobody's part. This is a guy who knew what he was doing when he was putting this team together. I ate that up. That's nice.
Well, he's picking the misfits and absurd people from the world, and they're in a place where it really is absurd for them to be. And I really did like that. Maybe in some ways they're like-minded, because he was kind of a lost soul after the Brotherhood of Evil moved on without him. So in many ways he was abandoned the way Frenzy was. So there is a connection between the two of them too, and their stories in different ways. But I mean, they definitely have. These would be two people that would be like souls.
Mm-hmm. Now, to mention a connection between the Brotherhood of Dada and the Doom Patrol itself as just being very similar groups in a lot of ways.
They're both the misfits of their different society, banding together. It's misfits of the world unite kind of thing. Now, was I the only one who chuckled that this great evil that was basically destroying everything was one of Jane's personalities? As Fogg is eating these things, he comes across something that he can't handle, and it just, he shoots it out, and this thing just, this fifth horseman just starts to grow and build, and it starts pulling from the painting, getting even more powerful. And I was just like, the villains won, but the reason they lost is because one of the heroes, well, she had some evil force living inside her. So, you won by defeating him, but you also lost by defeating him. Nice little story twist.
I love that in the face of this giant, overwhelming evil horse, that we see them they all look a little bit more normal. Now, really, at this point in time, I'm like looking at them, I'm like, in this issue, when you see Nobody talking with Sleepwalker and Fogg, I'm like, they all seem like kind of like a shadow pact superhero group or something like that. At that point, I'm like, all right.
And that 2-page spread where the horse rises out of the water is just amazing.
Yes, totally agree. There are some artwork pieces in this that really, not only do they hold up extremely well, they're just downright breathtaking. Mm. With the helmet behind it and everything, it's just like, whoa.
It's a heavy metal album cover.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, easily. Now, how cool was it, though, that the villains actually had to save the heroes? They recognized they weren't going to be able to stop this thing, so let's get the heroes back. And, they catch Robot, they fix up Robot Man right basically at the point of death. Once again, Quiz is able to do her little mojo, and she did like a temporal shift so that it changed, so that he was his life support thing was never ruptured. They go back, they free Negative Man. They of course have Jane right there, and it's just like I laughed out loud the fact that these villains said, "We won! Oh, well, quick, go get them!" And even in Frenzy's dialogue as he's explaining is saying, if it hadn't been for this one thing, we would have won, and who knows, we would have gone on to the rest of the world, but oh well, we had to take care of this. And I was just like, man, that's a neat little twist in this, that the villains win and then have to release the heroes because they need them.
Oh yeah. And it's the enemy. The enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
And in many ways, they are the heroes of this world. When you think about it, this is their world. This toy is totally created in their image, so to speak. So they are the leaders. And this would be somewhere that they would have motivation to protect because this is home for them. This is safety for them. So that was interesting as well.
And then, of course, Captain Personality, Robot Man, won't admit that they needed them to they needed the villains to free him and save him. He's like, oh, we would have figured out a way to get around him. Like, dude, if they hadn't done that, you'd be dead. There's no coming back from that one, Johnny.
Yep.
I like when Rebus connects with Jane.
Yeah.
And he's acting as the communication tool because of her nature. They seem to, have a way to interact and connect, and how he acts as almost like a focal point throughout this story.
Now this was the
enigmatic.
Right. Okay.
Awesome.
Good job. Woo-hoo.
I know I had my moment.
You get your gold star.
Nuts. No, but I mean it's really a word that's important to me because it totally fits the mood and the tone of what this character is. I love the way he carries himself. There was something about it makes him special and unique from the other two. And he's kind of he's your quiet guy that when he does speak, it means something. Like every time he does or says something, there is a purpose, a meaning behind it, and it causes, it's for the purpose of either passing on information or for moving forward the solution to a problem or a situation. Otherwise, very quiet. So I love that kind of character, and it's in contrast to these other two.
Now the fight if you want to call it that, between Jane and the Fifth Horseman. That was another one of those sequences where the basic, simple concept of it is very, classic, understanding, very easy to get your grasp around. The horseman's able to feed off the painting and will eventually grow to the point where it'll burst out of the painting and devour then the entire world. And because it's part of Jane, she's able to maybe get access to it, maybe control it. Now, that's just a simple, basic, comment of it. But I tell you, this sequencing, I not only read multiple times, I actually took freaking notes before I finally really got a grasp on everything that was going on with, with this one fight sequence, and it's the main fight sequence in the end of this, this story arc. And once I got a grasp of it, I was like, man, that's a cool thing. Just how the different layering they had to go through to explain what it is and how they defeat it. I was just like, wow, that's wow.
I liked that the heavy emotion from it too bled out into the outside world. Like if you were close to the painting, as Superman gets close to the painting, he feels what's going on. And those reverberations of that emotional energy, because it was Jane's, the emotion from Jane too, that connected to Clark, and he felt that. It added a power to what was going on for me.
I don't know, when you read the Doom Patrol and when they come up with when they confront these situations, it's interesting because they solve these situations, but without violence, really, without throwing punches. It's throughout, using reason or other methods. I think that's kind of an interesting aspect of them.
Yeah, it is something that sets them apart and gives them kind of a unique flavor.
Yeah, this was definitely kind of like a battle of wills, or kind of the inner turmoil, the inner strength of conviction, that instead of a physical, throwdown, how hard can I punch this horse? No, Jane actually had to reach into it, become part of it and try to gain control of it, and even then she wasn't strong enough by herself to gain control. But, and that's where Nowhere Man kind of once again, he, steps up, if you will, and says, hold on, you can't do it, but all of us combined. And he was a guy throughout this, he's throwing out little absurd comments, and even Robot Man called him on it one time saying, what the heck are you saying, this stupid stuff? He's like, the world's about to end. Might as well say stupid stuff as we go out. And I'm like, okay. Once again, the absurd nature of this guy. And I love the fact that because Jane couldn't control it, because it's so abstract and so unusual and just the nature of the painting, but not control it. Try guiding it. Okay, not guide it to a specific place. And they actually led it to what is Dada. It's this horse fed on ideas and ideologies and in the various nature of the painting. Well, Dada is the anti-idea. It destroys meaning. It strips away all sense and significance. So basically, they just led the horse to the whatnot of the painting, and they were able to kill this idea creature. Sean's just shaking his head going, oh my God, you spent all that time just setting up that stupid joke. But seriously, I did like the fact that it was...
I like it, though, because it is fitting, because it's often when you say whatnot, it's absurd.
Absurd, exactly. It fits. Everyone asks me, what is the whatnot? Now we're seeing what the whatnot is.
You don't really know, though.
No.
So don't pretend like you do.
No one knows.
Yes.
Well, that's part of the
right.
the
It's
zen
absurd. I agree.
Whatnot.
It's absurd.
It's
yes.
it's the unknown, and I like that. That's what it was that guided it, and that's what
I
they
love
had
that you're
to
trying to make it
access
seem
this.
like it's philosophical, though.
Well, it is to me.
Meditating on the whatnot.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do that and you may go insane, or you may get enlightenment. One of the two. You don't know which one you're going to get. You can guess all you want which one I got when I did.
I think you got flowers.
Well, hey, rose petals, baby. Rose petals.
We saw them earlier in this. I like the whole epilogue of this as it starts going on, because you have this bit where the painting's really falling apart around them, and the absurd man almost tells one joke too far, because he does like what the others feel, and it shows. You got to remember, he was a human who got like this way because of an experiment, and while he does get into this whole absurd vibe, ultimately, in the end, he tells this horrible joke where he rallies them that he doesn't want to go to jail, doesn't want to go there, he wants to stay there. So, Frenzy and all the guys say, oh, yeah, we'll stay here, we'll hang out, this is our place, this is our man, gave us some self-respect and all that stuff. Lloyd, I was only joking when I said that. I don't actually want to shatter. I mean, that to me was a priceless moment. It was funny, but at no point in time did it feel unrealistic, because I could see him going, the joke's gone too far.
hey, guys, I was just kidding. Come back. But yeah, that, just a beautiful wrap up to that. That was just, I don't think, because I was trying to figure out how this could end. How could they deal with these people on the outside? Because this is a powerful team. And when it first got started, they kind of, you'd pass them off as being a joke. Whether it's because when you're looking at them, they don't look too seriously. But in the end, this is a mega powerful team when they're working and fighting together. So I liked how this ended it. And again, they didn't defeat them by beating them up. They gave them what they wanted. They wanted their own little world. They wanted a place where they made sense. And right here is where you see it. And in the final letter, the ending of the letter with Frenzy, as he's wrapping up saying, hey, this is where we belong. This is who we are. We're reconstructing this world. This is it. We're happy. I am the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. So I was just like, it fits. It works for them. Now, Nowhere Man's probably a little bit PO'd, but everybody else is going, yeah, this is great.
The painting does wind up back in the hands of the collector.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting kind of book ending to this particular tale.
Yeah, it's got the little bit smeared, and it's still a unique thing for the guy, and I like the fact that he'd want it back again, of course. This is something occult and, freaky. Now, who knows if it still has any powers to suck people in, but I like the fact that he kind of covers it up.
There seems to be a world still within it.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know if the doorway to that world is locked in.
All right, so as we see Paris restored and the fact that they're still trapped in the painting, we do get to see the fifth horseman, the rocking horse. Mm-hmm. Now,
that I thought was cool because you think about it, the absurd nature of the painting. So it's pulling out all the energy, and when they're able to contain it using, their combined efforts through, channeled through Jane, and she took it to the Dada, and it just since the Dada is just pure absurdity, it took this massive destructive force and made it like the most absurd thing possible, a wooden rocking horse.
But
that's how I saw
how
it.
absurd is it? Because what we learn about Jane, and we'll talk about this in our second segment when we talk about this, is this from Jane's childhood? Is my question at this point. Because when we learn,
I didn't think about that.
When we learn how young she was, she's repressed. What was it as a young child?
Oh yeah, I didn't even.
She's repressed a lot. So I'm wondering: is this horse as absurd as it looks, or is there a connection to Jane?
Dang, I didn't even.
Because remember, this is coming from Jane. So is there more to it than?
Oh, dude!
On the surface, it looks absurd, but is it? Is my question.
Dude, that's outstanding. That didn't even dawn on my head until you just mentioned it now.
Me either. Yeah. Wow.
I know that was for me. It was like the first thing because when I read that issue, because I talked about how much I enjoyed this issue. The issue that follows it, the one we're going to kick off with next week, is probably my second favorite issue, and it's close running with this issue because of the fact that we really kind of deal into some. As much as we dealt with Frenzy here, we deal with Jane to the same level next issue, and some of the things that I was learning about Jane and there really made this issue, this ending, read a lot different for me on my second read through because I was like, whoa. We see that Jane here is collapsed because of the whole battle and everything that happened, and it looks like she may be either mentally comatose or dead. They don't really reveal that yet, but we do find out that she's like in a coma of sorts. But it could be a very permanent thing. And the Doom Patrol will have to react to this, and that's where we're going from here.
Yeah, and cool looking, though, artwork, because, their boosters initially like, hey, we got some good news and some bad news. Good news, this is the fifth horse here. Bad news, and then you just see Superman, carrying Jane. He's like, I'm sorry. And it's just like, one, that it's Superman, telling you, and it's, that for me was like, wow, this is Superman holding your fallen teammate, and it's, you don't know if she's dead, you don't know what's going on with her. That was a wow kind of moment that just, because, one, it is Superman, it would have had a different vibe if it had been like Blue Beetle holding her, but, I was like, yeah.
So it also strengthens, again, those ties to the DC universe, having Superman there.
Yeah, and I think it totally fit in this. And this was a DC Universe book at the time that these issues came out. But it shows that I think Vertigo-style concepts. And see, my issue with that is, and I know, I'm sure people are of very different minds of it. I think there are certain books that would attract a Vertigo audience that if you would bill it as being a Vertigo title, it lets people know this is more of a mature approach. It lets people know that, hey, this might be more your flavor. And I think in a day and age right now where you really need to try to attract, especially for concepts like Doom Patrol and things like that, where you need to attract the maximum audience for it so it can survive, if it's a unique concept and it fits, I'm not saying force it or pigeonhole it or shove it into there if it doesn't work. But in this case, a book that easily works there, what does it matter if there are DC Universe characters in it if it is something that is clearly Vertigo in nature? I don't want to see the Vertigo as a universe. It would be a DC Universe book that is a Vertigo title because of its nature, not because Vertigo has to be a part of. Vertigo's a line to me.
Right.
It's not a part of the 52, but there's no reason why a Vertigo book couldn't be part of the 52 worlds.
Right, I agree. I wouldn't want to see, like, Vertigo become like its own world or universe and all, but the occasional crossover could definitely work.
And I think that's what people really want when they bring that up at conventions, is that there are certain characters that have been used by Vertigo that naturally, like if you look at the original issues of Sandman, they clearly take place in the DC universe. It does shift away from that, but I don't see if there's good storytelling. I mean, Sandman Midnight Theater, had crossovers with the Sandman, the Golden Age Sandman that was in there, and that was a brilliant read. So I think there are elements of Vertigo titles that would work well But that would certainly be, if there was a reason on a title-by-title basis that it actually, I wouldn't ever force it, I wouldn't ever edict it or anything like that. I would take a story that, like, naturally you take a look at it and say, okay, it's set in the DC universe, you've got a wonderful idea, but this is clearly something that would also appeal to a Vertigo audience. Why would you not put that as a Vertigo label? Or even call it a DC Vertigo title where you put both labels on there, letting people know that this is a blending title that would fit in that. Just to me, I think you let people know that this would appeal to that audience, and it's written for that audience. It's got a mature label on it. It fits in that case. I don't know. It's just that's. I hate seeing books that are like unique in concept like this canceled because one of the strengths of having a reading universe of characters is this is clearly something very different than any other team book. Shadow Pact was a good example when that was brought up before. That was another oddball team book that was out there that it's refreshing to read that. I love my regular superhero teams, but when you get something a little quirky, it actually, to me, adds some depth to my regular team books as well because you get to see different character dynamics and how they react and work. And this to me was, through multiple read-throughs, this did grow on me more and more and more, and I got really into it, and I definitely am picking up the other volumes.
Yeah, and as I said, this just in our discussion we've had, I'm enjoying it more, and I'm looking forward to it more. So yeah, this is something that I think part of it is because of Grant Morrison, who he is, just his nature of writing. It's one of those things where you do need to talk about it. You do need to think about it. You got to look outside the box sometimes.
Well, and I think that's nice because it's a social experience then, where I think it, as a shared experience, you get a lot out of it. And I think it's something as fans right now, we have the internet, we have forums, we have Skype, we have these opportunities. I mean, this was fun to have you on, Dave, and to talk about this, to get your background and what you've already read, and to be able to, I didn't read it, and we deliberately didn't. We made the decision to say, you know what, we're not going to read Volume 1, because we figured that there are listeners right now who are enjoying this as well, who maybe this is their first exposure as well. I think you responded in the forum to one of them. Somebody posted in the forum they were concerned about purchasing it. Can I purchase this and do it? That actually drove my decision to not read it. When I read that, I'm like, well, you know what? No, let's do this. We said we're doing Volume 2. So as long as neither of us read Volume 1, why don't we stick to that? And we can come at it from that perspective. And I enjoyed it just as much as if I had read Volume 1.
You can do this one easily without reading Volume 1 because the information that's in Volume 1 there's very little because it's very self-contained, and maybe a few things here and there like the 3 parts of Negative Man or Rebus, and maybe in Crazy Jane a little bit, but you get so much of her in the second volume that it's not really that important. So it's just it's a good volume to get started in.
Well, and it does. The 3 parts of Negative Man are gradual. Did you? Now, I'll ask. Well, let me ask you because I actually looked it up, but I did start looking it up based on the second part where he was with the team and they used him as a key to get in. I realized, wait a minute, this guy's got multiple people in there. Did you grab that from the story, or was it something you grabbed from this discussion?
I had an understanding of it from reading the stories, and I figured out, okay, there's a couple of times when he said, I'm a man and a woman in one body. I'm like, what? And then later on again, I'm like, okay, so this guy's got multiple personalities in there as well. So I did eventually get it. I didn't do I did very little outside research on this just because I kind of wanted just to take the pure knowledge just from this and seeing if I could figure things out. And there was so many times where I almost grabbed the first, because I've already bought the first volume. I knew I couldn't just have Volume 2 of something. I'd have to Volume 1 and 2. So I almost read it a couple times, but I didn't because I really wanted to go into this with my main knowledge just came from this book.
I'm buying 1, 3, 4, and 5. Yeah. I have not done so yet. I was going to when I originally ordered this, and I actually picked this volume up at a con, just because they happen to have it there. In Stock Trades was actually at a con. I picked it up.
Cool.
So.
Nice.
So I'll do 1, 3, 4, and 5, and I'll grab it from their website because with their $50 discount, I'll grab it that way. It's because I won't pay any shipping. But I liked it enough that I figured let me pick up Volume 2. If I like it enough, I'll pursue it. I got so many trades as it is, but this is one that'll be on my upper stack to read the trades because I really enjoyed it. I want to thank Dave again for a great recording. We are going to be finishing up with Dave recording next weekend. It's either going to be on next week's episode or the week after, depending on how things look with the recording segments that Jim and I are doing. We decided to stop at issue 29 because it was a logical breaking point. We go on to issue 30. It kicks off into a spotlight issue and then kind of a whole new arc, so it'll be really a nice point for us to do a whole brand new segment because it'll be very contained in its nature. So I want to thank Dave certainly for joining us. That 14-hour time difference that Dave has from us really made it kind of fun to record because we were really almost in a complete other day than Dave was. So it was kind of fun to chat with him and have a good time. This is one of the nice things about the show is that we're able to talk with someone all the way on the other side of the world from us, and that was just really a blast. So looking forward to finishing that up.
Hey guys, it's Mr. Winter from the forum. I just got done listening to your Thanksgiving Day podcast. Great job as always. Wanted to leave a couple of comments. The first regarding the Batman 681. Have to say I was a little disappointed with this ending. I know what you guys are saying about Bruce Wayne not necessarily knowing all along what was going on, but equipping himself for what would happen. I don't know. The issue to me just felt too much like, I don't know, it felt like it was cheating a little bit, that there was too much of this Batman knew all along about the Black Glove, that they existed, and that he knew all along about Jezebel, and that he knew all along, or that the broken radio was always the Bat radio. I don't know. It felt sort of like a poorly done Ocean's 11 movie, where you're sort of turned on to all of these things after the fact instead of. I think they could have more cleverly given us some clues as to what was going on throughout the story, or given us some subtle hints that maybe Batman wasn't being victimized as much as we thought he was. I think I would have appreciated the ending more, as opposed to just sort of feeling cheated a little bit. But a good story overall, just a little bit of a letdown at the end. I would give the series as a whole a positive review. My other comments have to do with Final Crisis. I have to say I was really into this story for quite a while, the first three issues, and then that break in between issues 3 and 4 really took a lot of momentum out of it for me, and now evidently issue 5 has been delayed unexpectedly. I'm not sure when it comes out. I think maybe next week. But that just seems to be sort of, I don't know, just really sort of sapping the momentum out of the story. It's been difficult for me to continue to be as excited about it as I once was. And I have been reading some of the other books, Resist, Rage of the Red Lanterns, Submit, but it's just not there for me. So maybe I'll feel otherwise after issue 5. Maybe that'll help get it back. I'm certainly hoping that's the case. But that's kind of where I stand with it right now. The last comment that I'll make, and then I'll quit babbling, I'm just sort of curious as to what your take is on what's going on with Dan Didio right now over at DC. It's my understanding that he had a pretty big blow-up with James Robinson from the Superman titles, and has forced Grant Morrison to rewrite the ending to Final Crisis, which probably doesn't bode well. I'm just sort of curious as to what your take is on that. If you have an opinion, maybe you don't, and in which case it's not a problem. But was kind of curious as to what others are thinking, what the consensus is out there about what Didio's doing, if it's a good thing, if it's a bad thing, and if we can expect to see Grant Morrison doing any more work for DC. I know that in between the countdown and what's going on now with Final Crisis, I have to imagine he's probably getting a little bit fed up. So I'm sorry this phone call isn't more positive. If you don't want to use it, I won't be offended. But I will end on a positive note just by saying great podcast. As always, another great show. And looking forward to future shows. Thanks. Bye.
First of all, you weren't babbling at all. Jim and I both actually turned to each other and said, well, that's a really good call.
Yeah, this is going to inspire
was.
some pretty good conversations, I think.
Yeah, there's actually a lot I want to talk about there. I'm going to start with what he ended with first, if I could. There were rumors going around the net, and there might be some truth to the rumors, I don't know, that there was a blow-up between Dan DiDio and James Robinson over something in Superman or, some kind of conversation like that. The problem with that is any of those rumors, might there be truth to it to a certain extent? Yes. The problem is we don't know what that conversation was, how it started, how it finished, how detailed a blow-up it was. There were rumors that Robinson quit Superman. Now, anybody who's worked at any job, who's had an argument with the boss. And remember, I don't even know if this actually happened.
Right. So this is speculation.
But I know the Superman homepage that's out there posted something that said that James Robinson, and this was done on a website where they said that it was a rumor on a level where it wasn't necessarily, a concrete ironclad rumor. And they posted it was I forget the name, but I think it's Lying in the Gutters, I think was the name of it. And please, just excuse me on that one. But Superman homepage posted James Robinson's still doing it, still part of Superman. There's no truth in that rumor at all. At any job, and I would assume in the case where you're creating something, there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be arguments. I'm sure in any type where there's art, you hear about it in Hollywood with actors and actresses and things like that, where they have fights, they walk off of sets and they blow up and things like that. I think it's par for the course. Unless you were there and you have 100% the A to B conversation, it's hard to even comment on whether or not this happened or not. So that's I take that with a grain of salt in the fact that I'm sure it's normal in this type of medium that there's going to be disagreements and these things happen.
I know, when Vinny Chase was filming Smoke Jumpers, he had a huge blowout with his director, and the movie got scrapped, and now he's going to be doing lead in the next Scorsese film. You don't get the joke behind what I'm saying. That's HBO show called Entourage. I just quoted some stuff from that.
Okay.
But it's very similar. It
Obviously,
fits
I'm not watching Entourage.
It fits this where you never know what's actually going on. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. I think, remember last year before Chicago, they had that whole thing where they were saying Dan DiDio was going to get fired and Palmiotti was going to take over.
Yeah.
So,
we saw how
you never
that
know
was. Yeah.
What's going to happen, what's real, what's not. So I think it's...
On Newsarama, DiDio actually made comment on the Grant Morrison rumors and just said that the story's ending with Grant's original vision, rewrites, which this actually makes perfect sense, rewrites and changes on big events are normal, and that's always a part of it, but he said this is completely still Grant's vision, and that was never... He threw it out there on his own, I think, just to kind of clarify based on internet rumors on the whole thing. And as Grant Morrison has touched on the countdown thing himself, and if you take a look at Grant, there's actually in the forum, there's an interview with Grant Morrison that's linked to as a Newsarama interview where he doesn't see what the big deal is with the countdown Death of the New Gods discrepancy. He said it's normal whenever there's two different stories going on. And I don't know if Grant was blowing smoke, but I've never known Grant Morrison to Grant Morrison kind of says whatever he's on his mind.
He's not going to candy coat or sugarcoat anything.
So because if it bugged him, we'd know.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People are saying, he's being forced to do something. He doesn't seem like the personality that you could seriously force to do it because, what's the biggest threat you can make him? Oh, we'll fire you. Oh, okay. I don't think that would bother him because he knows who he is. He knows that if he were to get fired from one place, he'd get a job somewhere else. It's one of those things where he's got that much oomph backing behind his name that there's nothing that they could do to hurt him. So he's going to do what he's going to do. This is his vision. He's one of those writers I don't see ever them being able to manipulate and do something against his will. Now, maybe they could talk to him and say, hey, here's what we got going on overall scheme. And he's not like an idiot. He's going to see, there's a big picture here. And maybe he may shift some stuff. Maybe he may change some stuff. But in the end, he's not going to put his name on something that he doesn't 100% agree with and believe in.
Well, you got to remember, too, these people are professionals, though, and they work in an industry where you've got continuity, you've got other books that you have to consider, you have events that you have to consider, you have monthly titles that you have to consider. So I think, to a certain extent, I'm sure there are discussions that go on behind the scenes, some of which are heated, some of which are not so heated. where there is going to be a conflict between editorial and the writers and the creative process. And, there's one story that they want to tell, but then they can't tell it because of something is happening to character A and things like that. I'm sure these are very normal things that go on behind the scenes. I think sometimes we find out a little bit too much of what goes on behind the scenes. We all start speculating, gets thrown around the net, and stories that are probably, there's a certain hint of truth to them, get blown out of proportion because of it. Maybe it's 100% true. I don't know. At the moment, though, Final Crisis is ending. He's going to be writing that. My understanding is that he's going to be writing Batman in some format after all this. But I keep hearing hints of... And the way Dan DiDio worded it almost led me to believe that there might be another Batman title that might be launching with Morrison helming it. And I'm speculating on this. On Newsarama, they have Questions with Dan DiDio that they've been doing regularly. And they reference Grant Morrison writing Batman, and he talks about that Grant Morrison has a ton of Batman stories still to tell, and that they're trying to come up with the format to tell them. So I don't know if he's going to be on the regular Batman Monthly or if he is going to be on a new Batman title. That is interesting to see what's going to happen post Battle of the Cowl. And Grant referenced Battle of the Cowl, and sounds like he's coming back after Battle of the Cowl. So I think this is just a whole bunch of people hearing one comment and blowing it out of proportion. I'm sure these are probably very normal discussions. When you're writers, you've got to imagine writers and artists and creators are going to be very passionate about their work, so they're going to get vocal about it. And I'm sure editorial has directions that they have to look at the whole universe to keep us happy with continuity and all that. We're part of the problem, folks. Because we all scream, we want this to tie up, we want that to tie up, so then that leads to discussions where things have to change because of it. Wait, why does Final Crisis have to change? Because we were complaining. So, that's part of the issue is they have to consider this. So then he has to consider that, and then maybe what we heard from Grant Morrison was after such a discussion. So I don't know. It's one of those things where, do those things happen? I'm sure. I think what happens, though, is people speculate on the net, and then they take that speculation as gospel. And so I don't know. The James Robinson stuff, the Grant Morrison stuff, my honest, truthful answer is I don't know. We've never had any concrete verification that any of that's fact. It was told on a rumor column.
Right.
And even in the rumor column, if you take a look at it, they legitimately put down, they have a grading system on it, that it wasn't one of those concrete rumors, 100% ironclad, that type of thing. So you've got to give credit, that that's what that is at that point. So I don't know. That's kind of what my honest answer is on that one. I get interested sometimes in seeing that stuff, but then other times I like to walk away from it because sometimes you hear those comments and it annoys you and ticks you off and you start thinking things, and I'm like, I'm getting ticked off at something that has no ironclad verification. Why am I letting myself get driven by this? If I heard that, James Robinson was out and out fired, I love James Robinson's work, I would be mad. But, there's nothing like that going on. So, right. That's, if he quit, well, then that was his choice to quit. I don't know what the issue is, but I haven't heard anything of the sort that's been verification of that, and so that's kind of where I'm at. Batman 681, to talk about the disappointment of that one. Yeah, I've seen that around the net too. Other people were disappointed with the ending. My enjoyment was, if you looked at 52, we saw during the 52 process, Batman went into this cave. And after he went into this cave, there was training processes that he was going through leading up to and going into it. This was a glimpse at, that 681 issue was a glimpse at what was going on during that whole process with him. We're finally getting some answers as to what he was doing training-wise during that. Now, as far as my understanding with Black Glove, if you take a look at the run that we've had of Morrison's run, the Black Glove has been present at various times throughout it. And it's been hinted at in the storyline before, not just R.I.P., in multiple storylines. So Batman was aware the Black Glove existed. He would be searching for clues. We did see him pulling up information on the Black Glove throughout the multiple arcs that have been going through here. So he was investigating this. I'm under no impression at all that Batman knew every little detail of this. He used his training in some of the scenarios that he's run through to help him solve this mystery and help him get through this mystery. But I do not think he knew everything they were doing. That's why he had to go underground and had to go into it. You see in The Outsiders and in Robin and Nightwing, you see echoes of this. Not, Robin especially with some of the stuff that was going on with Spoiler, where Bruce was giving her the heads up, I'm going to be gone. He knew he would have to go deep into this. He would have to go through this process. And he did not know what it looked like. I do think along the way he picked up certain things. The Bat Radia thing, I I will also say I'm not 100% sure that was always what it was. At some point in time, he started rebooting, clicking again. I don't know when that was. And here's my question still coming out of it, and something we haven't had answered yet, did he reboot into the Bruce Wayne we know? Or, as Morrison said, is he something different? Is this something that after when he became the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, is it our Bruce back again or not? When did we see that verification?
Yeah, we haven't yet. This is
okay.
He is somebody different. There's no way he could come back the same guy.
He's going to be changed by this in some level.
And what level he's changed, we don't know yet.
Well, we all are changed by events we go through. So, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the Bruce Wayne that we knew, but somehow he was changed by it as well. The answers to those questions are all going to come through these next two issues. The 682 and 683 are the ones that are going to be addressing that. We're seeing some of it in 682 right now being addressed, but it left more questions for 683. I'm glad that they're kind of going that route. We're all different in what we like. As far as the reasons why with Jezebel he suspected it, I think what happened was a certain line made him suspect something, and as a detective, if somebody says something that makes you scratch your head, you're going to do some research. And then he explained what he found out about her through research and how he connected it all. So he told us how he got it. It was one line set him off. And if you're going to say the wrong thing to a detective,
and
he even hinted that even though he heard that, there was that part of him that had already connected with her that, was having issues with it. So I did like the fact that there was, in his mind, an emotional insecurity about the whole thing.
And any person who's in that type of line of work, where, investigations, law enforcement, detective, that type of stuff, you look at things a little bit differently. Like, when you see a tragedy of someone whose loved one's mysteriously murdered, your first thought is naturally, okay, who's the closest person? Like, when spouses are missing, any police officer, any detective, first thought is always the husband. Whereas a normal person would say, oh, that poor guy, man, it's got to be tough on him. It's just nature. It's just, the part of the detective process. When he's getting involved with his relationships, he's naturally going to be a little bit more leery and seeing what he's dealing with, because it's not just Bruce Wayne that he's worried about. It's Batman. It's Bruce Wayne the billionaire. It's the image, the upkeep, the everything that is him. So he's going to be a little bit, skeptical of any person he's involved with. Mm-hmm. And just the investigation process of him is normal. So I kind of like the fact that he wasn't so blindsided, and the fact that there was, that doubt and there was that questioning, because that is Bruce Wayne. That is the detective. Had he completely just thrown that out the window and gone with his heart, I would have been really upset by that.
I agree. It's interesting, but I mean, none of that. I didn't take his commentary as like a bitching phone call. Or
God,
like
no.
That. Not at
God, no. That was a great call.
You were bringing up some interesting discussion points on things that you thought, and we'll share our views, and you may not agree with them. That's okay. That's part of the point of the voicemails. I actually love this. So you actually totally get what I'm looking for. They can be positive. They can be things that are scratching your head about. It can be negative. I don't care. We want your thoughts, and then leads us to discussion. So thanks for giving us the topics to discuss. Final Crisis, The Break. That's interesting for me. See, I guess for me, I knew all along there was that break between 3 and 4. They announced that from the first issue. Grant was talking about that back at panels before issue 1, I think, was even released, that there was going to be a planned break that was meant to show the time difference where the world changed. For me, I'm reading Revelations, and that Revelations issue came out during that time, where we got to see for the first time what the people were looking like in that world. And that was that to me was almost Final Crisis 3.5.
Yeah.
In that we got to see them for the first time. We got to see Jim Gordon. We got to see the bad guys, all out there lined up. And we got to see Batwoman, taken by it, and the Question and Spectre trying to deal with their own issues amidst all this nonsense, because they had their own storyline going on. But then this all started happening around them, and they got pulled into it. So that to me was an important issue. And the Superman Beyond 3D also came out during that time, which I also consider to be a part of that. That one, I get what he's saying, though, in the sense that I had to go back and read issue 3. Then I read issue 4. and it kind of reconnected me with that. It was a big gap in this, but it was a planned one. So I don't, it wasn't a delay. They planned that one. Now, issue 5, there is a delay, and he's right. And some of that, I don't know if it's art, because I know that they switched to Carlos Pacheco sharing the art chores. I might be rewrites and changes. I know that they were looking to, tie things up, make things a little tighter, probably to please us. And that's going to be the honest truth of the whole thing. Anytime those changes happen, they're looking at, anytime they make changes like that, whether they're good or bad, they're doing it in response to their audience. So they're looking at stuff, to tie it up a little tighter. Also, they're doing it for the sense, though, where are the books going beyond this event? And what direction are we taking the books in, and how are we going to tighten them up? Ultimately, when issue 5 arrives, that'll be the deciding factor. Whatever they did, was it good? Was it the right move to make? We'll have to see when the issue comes out. For me, it's always, I've got to see the product first before I can even judge if it was a good move or not. That goes back to the whole thing where there's the speculation, what was going on with them. My rule of thumb is we have not heard anything since then. This comment was thrown out. We haven't heard anything since, other than a response from Dan DiDio about the Grant Morrison thing. We haven't heard anything since. If it's that big of a deal, believe me, you're going to hear more.
Yeah.
That's Grant Morrison. That's big noise. James Robinson, the same thing. We'll be hearing more about this. We're not. It's really not. None of the news sites are reporting anything else. The news sites would be all over this. Why wouldn't they? It's news for comic fans that they would want to know. There's been nothing since then. There was a rumor column that posted something. And it's a rumor column. That's what they do. You got to take rumors with a grain of salt, and when it becomes concrete, your news, believe me, Newsarama, Comic Book Resources, all the comic news sites are going to be all over that stuff if there's any truth to them as they go on. So, so there might be elements of truth to it, like any rumor, but there you go for that.
Yeah, and this delay really isn't bothering me that much, to be honest. The I'm not talking the planned delay. I mean the current one. The current one. It's I'd like it to be on time. I'd like to be when they promised, but I do look at how much of a delay are we talking? Now, if we're talking, All-Star Batman delay, then I will get upset. But if we're talking just 1 month, if we're talking like a week or two, if it's under a month, I don't even notice the delay usually.
No, and they still want to end this thing by the end of January, I think.
Yeah,
so still the goal.
I think,
and I think they're still on track for that. DiDio was mentioning that. The Newsarama column, if you really want to follow stuff like that, Dan DiDio answers questions there, and he did in the most recent one reference their goals for when they want to end. It sounds like the last week in January, first week in February is when they're working to end it, if I was reading that correctly. And please understand, I'm throwing this off the top of my head right now from what I glanced over when I was reading it. I read it from, top to bottom, but I don't have it in front of me as I'm speaking about this. So if you go to newsarama.com and check out the Dan DiDio columns there, you'll get more detailed information on when this is supposed to all end. I'm talking about issue 7. So it looks like in this time we're going to be getting a couple issues in a decent amount of time close together.
I mean, you don't have the news article memorized?
I don't.
Dude, you're supposed to be the smart one of the show. Come on.
Well, it just shows how smart we really are. If I'm the high bar, we're in trouble.
Hey, you're the educator.
Dude, I've got. If it's third grade related, I'm good. So stuff a 10-year-old needs to know. I'm your guy. Otherwise, I'm an idiot. But those type of phone calls, please do not feel like you have to censor yourself when you call here. And one other thing, too, I have never. I'll tell you one thing I will not air on the show, and I will contact the person ahead of time. If you bash another podcast when you call here, that I would edit out. And I would say I edited out, like the name of the podcast or something like that, because I don't want to be...
Yeah.
We're
all brothers and sisters here. This is a...
Well, the other thing is, too, I don't want to do commentary on other podcasts, unless it's to promote somebody. If it's to promote a fellow podcaster, I'll do that. But if there's one thing I would edit out on our show, it would be that. Other than that, your honest comments, I have never edited anything anybody's said on our show. That would be the one exception, though, because I don't want to, fellow podcasters. I think if you've got commentary or criticism for another podcast, go to them. That's kind of my take on it. I don't want to be the podcast that you come to for that. I think that should be and I would expect the same for me. If people got criticism on our show, air them here. But your comments were great. I didn't read them as negative. They were fair. You were talking about, you said you still like them. You just kind of, these are some questions that you have and things that are frustrating you at the moment. And I'm sure you're not the only one. All we can do is give you our commentary and go from there. This was a very good phone call. I really liked that one. So I was afterwards, you said I was babbling. I'm like, no, dude, you're touching on multiple high-end topics. I was like, no, it's fine. Great phone call. So thank you for that.
Hi, Sean and Jim. This is Lori Tomorrow on the forums, and I just wanted to let you guys know that I really appreciate your show, and I think you guys do a great job. I really like the longer episodes that you guys do. I think you have really great insight on everything that is DC related. I think that the format that you guys do with the interviews and the different bullets that you are really kind of cool. Not really good at the voicemail thing, but I had some spare time, so I thought I would send you guys a voicemail. See you on the forums. Bye.
Hey, Lori, thanks for the kind words, and please don't worry about whether or not you sound good or not. We sound like doofuses for hours every week, so...
I know.
You sounded great, actually. And I appreciate the kind words, actually. It's nice to know that people are enjoying the format that we put out. The whole point of recording this, if you guys aren't liking it, there's little point in us doing it. So... Jim and I can just sit around and chat without doing this portion of it. But we really appreciate that, and thank you so much. Lori's part of the Comic Book Roadshow and on the DaFixer's Hideout podcast, Podcasting After Dark. So I'll have links to those up on our show notes. Definitely check out Lori. She's been a longtime supporter of our show and a very good friend. I always look forward to when I put up new episodes. Lori, at some point in time, will post up there, downloading now. It's kind of like her little catchphrase. And it does mean a lot to know that you guys are there and that you care and you're waiting for the episodes and all that, because it's well worth putting it together then for the time that we put in. So thanks so much.
Hey, guys, it's Donnie Salvo here from Reality Wasted. What's going on? You threw out the question on where in continuity does Last Will and Testament take place in the Final Crisis storyline. Well, I have researched, got all my information, and dare I say, contabulated it. And the answer I came out with, it happened in 2008. That's all I know. That's all we can do. I really don't think it's clear. Seriously, I don't think it's clear on a timeline. I don't even know if it's a Final Crisis crossover, technically. But anyway, there's one book I wanted to just geek out about, and that's Young Liars. I just love this book. It is so fabulously twisted and weird. And that one issue, I think it was 11 or 12 with the spider things that came from... And it actually took me to the next issue to realize that was a dream in her coma. But when I was reading that issue with the spiders that came from the other planet, I thought David Lapham lost his mind. I was like, what's going on here? But it all worked out, which is good. But that's just a fabulous book. And it came out of nowhere. I just picked it up on a whim, and the first issue hooked me. And I also wanted to know, what was the very first DC comic you ever read? The very first. Not, I know how, you guys got into comics via the, Batman TV show. I know you've mentioned that before and such. But I mean, the very first DC comic. Mine was, I'm gonna turn your 3-hour show into 9 hours right now. this is going to be a long voicemail, but there's a story I just wanted to share, and I thought, Norge, with you being a teacher, you appreciate this. When I was in 4th grade, they had a reading class, and they had levels, 1 being the highest and 5 being the lowest. And I hated to read. Hated it. And I was in the lowest level. And, you know, the teacher was talking to my parents, and she actually said, I remember this because it kind of surprised me thinking back on it, because she was an elderly woman. And she said to my mother, why don't you try comic books? And so the following Saturday, my father drove me to a newsstand, and I bought New Teen Titans. I believe it was number 34. It was the issue where Terra was revealed to be a traitor. And even as a 4th grader, when I saw George Perez's artwork, the way he drew eyes and facial expressions, and you could actually feel the emotion in Donna Troy's eyes, I was hooked. I was hooked. I was buying everything my parents would let me. I had a file at a comic book store. I was going nuts. And within, I believe it was 2 months, maybe 3 months, I was in the top reading group. And I have not stopped collecting comics since. And so I was just wondering what your first DC comic ever was. And that's about it. Oh, and Reality Wasted has a Libsyn account now, so you can reach us at that there with the Libsyn.com. And we have a contest, and all right, I'm going to make it 10 hours. We have a contest going on. If you leave a 1-minute review of something, a movie, comic book, television, show, video game, whatever you're enjoying or not enjoying, we have a rating system, and it's the most you could give. Instead of like 6 stars or whatever, we do Chewbacca's. So you know, if you're into something, you give it 4 out of 6 Chewbacca. You leave that one review on our voicemail line, which is 1203-903-0844. Okay, that's how I remember it. 903-0844. You will win a random DVD and a random graphic novel. And we're not doing like the first 5 or whatever. It's whenever the prize closet runs out. So please, guys, thank you so much for all your support and plugging my show whenever I call here like a desperate jerk. But anyway, please let me know, what was your first DC comic? And your stories behind it. It's okay. Thank you. Keep up the good work, guys. And I'm sorry I made this an 11-hour show. All right. Bye-bye.
First things first, I want to start with the whole thing about, he said he was plugging like a jerk. And I said, you know, when I got started in podcasting, I was very fortunate that there were fellow podcasters who were plugging us on their shows. Comics Cast was one of them. Around Comics plugged us. Our friends at Comic Geek Speak, I wouldn't, have started podcasting if it weren't for them, and they were wonderful with us. They had me on their show to plug the podcast and everything like that. They were great. Geek Speak with Ian Levinstein, which became Comic Timing. He was wonderful to me. We've been very lucky in that. I mean, I'm not even doing justice. There were other ones. Collected Comics Library. They were very good to me over there. We had a bunch of podcasts that were, and I apologize, I'm leaving names out, and I know I am. So I apologize for, I'm just throwing this off the top of my head at the moment. And it's actually a very nice problem that there were so many fellow podcasters that were helping that I'm drawing a blank at the moment. But that was kind of the nice thing when I first got started. And when we first got started, but it really was like when this originally started, before you were even in the whole thing. Podcasters were helping me to get the ball rolling, and then you came on, and for some reason you're crazy enough to stick around. And then it very much became our podcast. So whenever I throw that out, please throw a we on it immediately, because this wouldn't be a show without Jim. But, please, if I can help out other, if you call here on our voicemail line and you're a podcast, please pump your podcast on there as well, because it is about cross-promotion. I always do it in the beginning of the show where I thank listeners for helping us for that reason. And, to be able to just get the word out. People get to know you from your voicemails, so I appreciate that. The last Will and Testament thing, I totally agree with him. Wait, and just a point of clarification, I don't need to fit neatly in. It was a good story. It's enough for me. I feel it's kind of echoing what was going on at the time, and it was meant to be that kind of story. I agree with his point that I don't know that they intended it to be an official, like, plug-in, it fits here in between this issue, because there was nothing in there that referenced anything where it would fit. I think it was more of a good story that was told during a major earth-shattering crisis like this. And obviously, the best way to say is it occurred after Meltzer's JLA run, because the events, obviously, with Geoforce happen after that, and Deathstroke happen after that. So that would be time frame wise, if you want to fit in it somewhere. It happens after Meltzer's JLA run. It's part of the Meltzer verse, and it fits in there. And I'm fine. You know what? That's enough for me. I know continuity wise it happens there, and when they reference it later, which I'm sure he's going to come back to it at some point. It was an interesting story, and I liked it. This is an interesting dilemma for me. He asked when my first DC comic was.
I know.
And I can be perfectly honest with why I can't give a definitive answer to that. As a child, the reason why I always reference the 60s Batman show and Super Friends and stuff like that, I don't remember not having superheroes in my life, particularly Batman. My mom was incredibly supportive. So at an age before I would probably have a strong memory of it, I had comics in my life. I'm not saying I had like some huge long box or anything like that, but I always had comics or comic-related materials. As a kid, my earliest memories, I had a book and record set that featured Grodd and Sherlock Holmes. Now, there was a huge this is huge. This is a big record. It was a 33 RPM, one of those big, oversized records. Both sides had a different story on them, with a full-blown comic that accompanied each. I remember that. I had Treasury edition of Batman and the Hulk, which are very early things. I'm talking about the original. There wasn't any reprint or anything. This was like when it originally came out. I had one of those. Issues of Brave and the Bold from the first run I had. Justice League. The problem was there came a certain point in time where I got to an age where I didn't have any money to buy comics, so I was selling comics a lot of times to buy new comics. So I don't have any of those. I couldn't tell you issue numbers or anything. I was reading Justice League, the Batman series, but it were broken issues at grocery stores. You would grab and read those things. I could tell you the first Marvel comic I read, just because I was old enough that I remember. It was a Spider-Man Marvel team up involving Iron Fist, and it was a two-parter. And for the longest time, I never knew what happened in the second part because I couldn't find it. But I read the first part, and it was it ended a cliff, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Iron Fist was very cool and all that, but that's kind of what my memories are. I remember reading the Englehart run of Justice League, but not all of it, as a kid. So the Satellite era, I read that. So that'll give you kind of a time placement. I remember there was a crossover involving the New Gods, the JLA, and the JSA, and Darkseid, where Darkseid came back, and it was big and epic in scale. I don't remember what book it was in, but I remember Mr. Miracle sliding down with his little discs on his feet and all that. I remember that they found this huge statue of Darkseid. If anybody knows where this story took place, because I don't have it anymore, and I would love to read it again now. But it had the JLA, the JSA, and the New Gods, and Darkseid was coming back, and they were trying to prevent it, or they were in reaction to it, or something like that. This huge event that was going on. If I remember what issues that were, and they know what I'm talking about, this would have been back in the 70s. I don't remember what it is. I would love to read it again. I don't remember where it took place, though, or if it's collected somewhere. I might even have it, because I've been getting the Crisis on Multiple Earths collections, and maybe a part of that. I just haven't had a chance to read them yet. But but I'm dying to read it. So if somebody's like, if one of our listeners is clicking and saying, Sean, I know what you're talking about. Here's where it is. This is the book that you're looking for in the story. It was the JLA, JSA, and then versus Darkseid. So it's interesting. I don't have a set issue. It's an honest answer. I don't. It's I was very fortunate, and I thank my blessings that my mother, when I was into something like, I mean, Batman was my guy. I was always into Batman, always playing Batman, and my mother was just so incredibly supportive of that. To this day, she still buys me, like if she sees a Batman mug somewhere or something like that, I'll unwrap a Christmas gift, and it'll be some random Batman thing that she found somewhere that's just like a little, tchotchke trinket, that type of thing that she'll get for me, and I love it. It's very nice of her to do all of that. She still makes me feel like a kid in a good way. She'll bring me that back, and she still, that's so I get kind of choked up when I talk about stuff. It's kind of a very cool thing. My mom has always been the one that supported that. I can't tell you the individual issue though. Just kind of I can put you in a time placement on things that I remember that I had, but that I know weren't my first. I remember trying to send through the mail. There was a treasury size edition. I never got it. Shazam Superman, I think it was, and I don't remember why I didn't get that. It was back then. If you want, there were certain cereals or there were certain things that you buy if you collected enough of them and you sent it in. And I remember trying to win something like that, and I don't know. I have all kinds of crazy memories of things that I would love to place, but that I cannot exactly place.
Yeah, I'm kind of very similar on. I don't have an exact number, or even I don't even remember what happened. Other than I do, it was Green Lantern. Mm-hmm. And it was an issue where there wasn't a lot of fighting going on. And I remember as a kid reading it, and it was more of it kind of like he was doing more research, investigating, trying to track down the bad guy. And the next issue was where the big fight scene was. So it was a building issue. And I basically got it just in the Cub Scout unit I was in. We had solicited to the different comic book companies, and they had given us free comics, and and it was just passed out. And along with that, I also got an X-Men one, which was an X-Men versus Magneto. So I had this Green Lantern where it was a building, story, which probably led to a really cool fight sequence next issue, or I had this X-Men fight sequence where the X-Men were taking on Magneto. Needless to say, I went the X-Men route, and from then on, I was an X-Men guy. In college is where I kind of got into the first introduction to DC, and that was Batman, actually. So that was the first cognitive purchase that I had made on a comic book that I knew about that was DC. Up until then, I was a pure Marvel guy. So and that was Batman. It was Shadow of the Bat. Yeah, Shadow of the Bat #1.
Oh yeah, when they launched that.
Yeah,
series,
when they launched that, because it was a new Batman title, and
I have 50 on the wall behind you signed.
Yeah, and it was a new Batman title, and the guy, my buddy who is the DC guy, is like, hey, you got to check this. You're starting at round 1 here, dude. Oh, sure. I picked it up. I was reading that. That's
a very good series.
Jumped in on Superman and also Green Lantern Mosaic. So that was my first.
That was a great John Stewart story.
Those were my first cognitive DC purchases.
Cool. Yeah, I've had comics and comic book related material in my life since before kindergarten. So, try to go back there and try to remember what I had. It's very hard to do. A funny story, my stepdad goes to flea markets a lot, and he's really good at going there and finding bargains and finding things that have resale value and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of stuff around my mom's condo that either he's holding on to for the purpose of, selling it later, or, he's holding on to sell now. And the one day he was like, I want you to check on the value of some of these things. So he brought me up a bunch of book and record sets. They were mine. I had been looking for them for years. It was the Batman Sherlock Holmes one that I mentioned, the big. So I have it now. I have it again. I told him, I said, you fool, these are mine. And I said, wait. And he goes, no, they aren't. And I said, okay, here's what we'll do. I said, now you think that you bought them up at a flea market, right? And he goes, yeah. And I said, I've only seen the top one, right? He goes, yeah. I said, I will tell you every single one that's in that box. And I did. Although I am mad because I had a Batman and Robin one, which is the first one that I had, and it was a 45. And the artwork in it, I remember the comic, it was Batman and Robin versus the Joker. And the artwork was stunning in it. The comic's missing. I've got the record, but the comic's missing. So it's got the cover, like of what the book, because it was like a hard cardstock cover. But it was a real comic book that was in there that they had, adapted. So those are some of my earliest memories, those type of things. But I got that back. I got Superman City Under Siege, which is a really cool Superman story that was in there. I mean, those, as a kid, superheroes just blew my mind. And they still do to this day. I've never lost that. It's people wonder why I'm so positive about this, because they are my, they're my go-to. They're my escape from everything. As a kid, and I had a bad day at school or something like that, I came home and listened to superheroes. At work, I have a bad day at work, or I have a good day at work. It doesn't matter. You come home and you want that little bit of an escape. Comics are that place for me. They're so important to me in my life, and that's part of why we do this. But, yeah. It's a good question. It's a very good question. I don't know, and we're kind of answering it, though, just in the sense that we're sharing what our early experiences are with it and what we remember from them. So that's really the point of that question, is to share your early experiences like he did. And we did. We are answering the question by doing that, but I don't know a set issue. I wish I did. I would love to have the first comic I ever read. I just don't know what it is. Because it really was before I would remember, what was going on in there. Early Justice League stuff, for sure. Early Batman stuff, for sure, in the 70s. That was stuff that I was reading, I would have had. But there was no runs involved. I didn't, I was lucky. My mom at a grocery store, if I saw a comic, she would buy me one. And it could be a good couple months before I would read and reread it. And, it was, so there's a lot of value in that. Actually, our discussion about Doom Patrol, how we started in the second trade versus the first, it's very much like what my childhood experience was. This is the trade we started with, and you figured out along the way what was going on, and so it was kind of nice. In a weird way, it was very nice to have this experience again, and then just to kind of delve in and enjoy that, coming at it from that perspective again. Took me back to my childhood, so kind of fun. Appropriate phone call.
Now, I do have a question.
Sure.
Now, when we're giving like the minute reviews and the critique and commentary, and they'd use the Chewbacca scale. Mm-hmm. Now, do you say 4 Chewbaccas, or do you say how are you supposed to do it?
I think. Wait, I'll answer for them. When you call in and you do a 1-minute review, you need to do what you just did.
Okay. The look on your face was priceless, dude.
Yeah. When you call in, that's what you need to do. I will answer for him on that one. I'm going to call in for the contest. I've been wanting to call them, and I apologize. I'll be perfectly honest on our podcast. I have not had a chance to get to it, and I feel really bad because he's been very supportive of us with it. So I definitely want to call their podcast because video games. I would love to call a podcast and just chat a couple video games. I've got a ton of games I would love to just shout out. So I'll definitely call and do a minute review on it. That's really cool. And I apologize to them adamantly that I have not done that yet. It's been literally the scramble of trying to get this show together that has been doing that. But we will.
Hey, Sean and Jim. This is F2 calling. I just wanted to call in about Ambush Bug Year None number 4. Oh, my gosh. I'm not even halfway through the comic, and I'm rolling on the floor laughing. It is hysterical. When you get to the part with the chalkboard, classic. Classic Gifford, classic Fleming. It's great stuff, guys. I hope you like it as much as I liked it. Hope you have a great time reading it. And you guys take care. Thanks for the show. Listening to it every week. Can't get enough of it. Even listening to the old episodes. You guys take care now. Bye.
Well, thanks so much for telling us that you listen to the old episodes, because it's very flattering to me that some of our older material, I think with trades now, though, it does make it a little easier for people to do that, but I think people, like to hear commentary about stuff that they've read and all that, so thank you, that's very flattering. Ambush Bug has been really fun. The one thing I want to mention real quick, this month, in December, right now, for any of you to do comic book pre-ordering, Showcase Presents Ambush Bug is solicited. So definitely get that at a discount. If you do use our sponsor, dcbservice.com, definitely make sure to pre-order Showcase Ambush Bug if you have not read the old material, because it's a great way at a very inexpensive price to grab all that material in one handy-dandy volume. So I'm grabbing it just because I like Ambush Bug so much, which is nuts because I have all of it anyway. But I'd like to have the bound. I like the Showcase volume.
Yeah.
I like them because they're phone book size and all that. They're really, they're nice. They're affordable. Everything's collected in there. It's good reading versions for the comics just to have. So I'm a fan of collected volumes. That's great. You've been getting obviously the whole Ambush Bug series.
Yeah. I'm laughing. I'm having a ball with it.
I hope that they do this, periodically. Where I'm hoping this is successful enough, and that the creative team would want to do another one at another point. It seems like it would be a good idea to do this, end off this series, and maybe do another one, in a year or so or something like that, as commentary on the events that are going on then. It's kind of fun to see them spoofing the DCU with current events. I think that's when it's contemporary and it's new and stuff that you've read, it's even funnier. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. I remember that was the problem when we first did the first one. Some of the jokes were hard for you because you didn't read the material. Whereas for me, it was a laugh a minute because I had read all that. So that's kind of fun.
Totally cold in a donut.
And Jim, the Raging Oscars 2008 is coming in January. That's going to be our first episode in January, the best of 2008 across the DC universe. Listeners, send your top 5 categories, any that you choose, to senseiofwhatnot@gmail.com. We're going to share as much as we can from the info that you send in with us. Creators, books, characters, moments. Kind of do this kind of free form. Because I think what we'll do for this one, Jim, rather than tabulating the listener ones, we can just pull interesting things that the listeners have been throwing out there. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. And we've actually already had a couple people send stuff like that to me. So please continue sending it. And that's, again, is senseiofwhatnot@gmail.com.
Jim, our next episode is kind of up in the air, and the only reason why it's kind of up in the air is you and I are going to be doing some recording over the weekend, and I don't know what that's going to look like. We have a second part of the Doom Patrol segment we're going to do, and I don't know if that's going to be our next episode recording-wise, or if that's going to be the following week. We're recording it for sure this weekend, but I also got a set of JSA content that we want to get in as well. We're going to talk about the Kingdom Come specials and the most recent issue of JSA. So we're going to see what that looks like. We're also, of course, going to do Final Crisis, which is going to be on our next episode for sure. We've got, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it today yet.
I have not had a chance to read it yet today.
Okay. I got to read it today. I definitely want to talk about it next episode. Okay. I won't say a word other than that, but that's something we're definitely going to be talking about next week for sure is, doing our usual cover-to-cover dissection of Final Crisis, because that's a book that just begs to be talked about. So that next episode might be Final Crisis and Doom Patrol, or it might be Final Crisis and JSA. I don't know what that's going to look like. Please check the forum and the websites, and we'll let you know for sure after we're done recording which segments fit the best together for that. And, of course, any listener content that we have as well. I got a couple emails, too, that I want to throw on where we've gotten some information from listeners, particularly one from Stephen King, with some stuff about Action Comics that we should chat about. So that'll be fun stuff for next week. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, and we will see you then.
Bye.